Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Stott family. In June 2013, the staff at a medical center in Springfield, Missouri, faced a challenging situation when they admitted 24-year-old Sarah Stott. She was in critical condition, losing consciousness and crying out in pain when she regained awareness. Doctors discovered she had a brain hemorrhage and kidney failure, causing her organs to function erratically. They struggled to understand her rapidly deteriorating state. The fight for Sarah's life lasted several days until they received an anonymous tip. The caller revealed that the Stott family had been plagued by mysterious illnesses for a year, which had already claimed the lives of Sarah's father, Mark, and her brother, Sean. Both had died without receiving medical care, and now it seems Sarah was next. Fortunately, she was admitted to the medical center, giving her a chance at survival. The police began investigating the unusual illnesses affecting the Stott family, suspecting it was not just a coincidence. The family comprised 6 members: Mark, Diane, and their children Sean and 3 daughters Sarah, Rachel, and the 9-year-old girl. Mark Stott, born in St. Louis in 1951, he met Diane while studying in Texas. Despite their differences, they quickly found common interests and began dating. Mark was optimistic and artistic, performing in a band, while Diane was more reserved and introverted. Their relationship progressed rapidly, leading to an unplanned pregnancy, after which they decided to marry. Following the birth of Sean, Diane pursued her education, graduated from nursing school, and began working in a hospital's cardiology department. In contrast, Mark became a stay-at-home dad, managing household responsibilities and caring for the children. It appeared that Diane prioritized her career, striving to provide for the family. To seek better job opportunities, they relocated to Springfield, Missouri, a tranquil town ideal for raising children. This town was also Diane's hometown, conservative and religious, making her feel safe and secure. In the years that followed, they welcomed 3 daughters. To outsiders, they appeared to be the ideal family, but behind the appearance, they faced significant challenges. Sean, their son, struggled with health issues from a young age and was diagnosed with autism during his school years, which required special support. Despite the father's efforts, the daughters also experienced learning difficulties in school, particularly Sarah. The family's biggest challenge was financial. They simply did not have enough money to support their growing household. One income was insufficient to meet their needs, and they needed to find a new home because their current one lacked space. Mark occasionally helped the family's finances by taking on odd jobs, such as bartending. However, he primarily focused on caring for the children. In his free time, he pursued his passion for music, writing songs and playing various instruments. He eventually began performing with a musical group, which generated some income, but it was still not enough for their large family. Despite their struggles, they seemed prepared to face their challenges together, until April 8, 2012, the day after Mark's birthday. In the family home lay the lifeless body of Mark. His wife reported that he had died from a mysterious illness resembling the flu, which progressed rapidly. She stayed by his side to comfort him, but despite her efforts, Mark's condition worsened significantly. His body even appeared unusual, with his skin taking on a yellowish tint. Diane mentioned that on the day Mark died, he experienced a seizure, something he had never had before. She attributed this to his age. When the seizure occurred, she wanted to take Mark to the hospital, but he insisted that he wanted to stay home and rest. Despite his wishes, she began preparing to leave. By the time she was ready, she found him unresponsive. 45 minutes after the seizure, she called emergency services. Upon a quick examination, nothing seemed suspicious, and the death certificate attributed his passing to natural causes related to his age. During this time, their son Sean was very concerned about his father's health. He documented all of Mark's symptoms on social media and questioned the natural causes of his death. Diane requested that her husband be cremated, and his ashes were scattered over a local lake near the church. Mark's death shocked everyone. He was a strong, healthy, making his sudden passing all the more puzzling. 5 months later, on September 2012, the police were called to another home for similar reasons. This larger house was more suitable for the family. Diane lived there with her children after selling their previous home and receiving an insurance payout following her husband's death. On that day, Diane found her 26-year-old son, Sean, dead in his room. His death mirrored the flu that had claimed his father's life. After her husband's passing, Diane became more proactive and took Sean to the doctor when he started showing symptoms. However, the doctors found nothing alarming, only a water imbalance. Despite Sean's worsening condition, Diane stopped taking him to the doctor, claiming he refused medical help and felt uncomfortable, which she attributed to his autism. The night before he died, Sean seemed to improve, leading Diane to believe that his mysterious illness was fading. She went to church with her daughters to pray for him. When they returned, they found Sean unresponsive, having apparently tried to get out of bed and fallen, leaving a pool of blood on the floor. His sudden death shocked everyone. Sean worked at a center for people with disabilities and was known for his positive and friendly nature. Like his father, Sean was cremated, and his ashes were scattered over a lake. About 9 months later, in June 2013, Sarah, the eldest daughter of the family, was hospitalized with symptoms similar to those that had caused the deaths of her brother and father. The police arrived at the hospital 2 days after Sarah was admitted in critical condition. While doctors were doing everything they could to save her, they could not provide the police with any specific information. They were still trying to identify the cause of her unusual illness, which resembled the flu, but it was concerning that both her kidneys and brain had failed. The medical staff conducted several tests, and there was an unspoken fear that Sarah might have been poisoned. The police were contacted by an anonymous caller from the church that the Stott family attended, where Diane had played the organ for many years. The pastor suspected that these events were not mere coincidences and feared that there was a murderer at work, so he decided to call the police. He shared his concerns that Mark's death and Sarah's worsening condition might be connected. The pastor found Mark's death particularly suspicious, noting that he had been healthy right before he died under similar circumstances. He was beginning to suspect Diane's involvement in these tragic incidents. During this time, Diane claimed that her daughter was simply ill while she acted like a grieving widow, a mother mourning loved ones who were dying under mysterious circumstances. This behavior helped her gain significant support from the religious community. However, the pastor suspected that Diane was deliberately maintaining this facade to avoid uncomfortable questions. When Diane last visited her daughter in the hospital, her behavior changed dramatically. The nurses noted that she was in a good mood. She joked and talked more about an upcoming trip to Florida than about her daughter's serious health issues, despite the doctor's alarming prognosis. They were uncertain if the girl would survive this mysterious illness. The mother's apparent indifference only heightened the authorities' suspicions against her. Diane was invited to voluntarily come to the police station for a discussion. On June 20, 2013, she arrived at the police department. By then, Sarah's condition had stabilized somewhat, but none of the medical tests revealed any toxins in her body. It appeared that any harmful substances had been completely processed and left no trace. The detectives knew they had to be very careful when speaking with a potential poisoner. Meanwhile, they couldn't perform many tests on Sarah due to her worsening condition. They continued to hope that Sarah would recover and provide information for the investigation. The detectives aimed to understand the events leading up to the victims' illnesses and gather clues about the causes of their deteriorating health. The situation was similar to what had happened with Sean. On that tragic day, Diane had gone to church with her other daughters, and upon returning home, she noticed that her eldest daughter, Sarah, was very ill. Prior to this, Sarah had been experiencing mild symptoms similar to those of her brother and father, so Diane did not panic initially. Diane believed they would be able to help Sarah when she returned home, and she eventually sent Sarah to the hospital. The first thing Diane questioned was whether her daughter had attempted to end her own life. Sarah had bipolar disorder, which meant she might have harmed herself. Diane reviewed all the medications available to her daughter and insisted that Sarah had tried to end her life multiple times in the past. It seemed as if Diane was desperately trying to persuade the police to believe her perspective. The officers did not inform Diane that they were also investigating the deaths of Mark and Sean, as they wanted to avoid alarming a potential suspect. During this time, Diane acted unusually. When responding to questions, she mentioned that Sarah had been a difficult child, was struggling to find work, and was not doing well in school, all while tuition bills were piling up. This seemed like an attempt to justify her actions, which felt out of place given that her daughter was fighting for her life in the hospital. Additionally, Diane expressed resentment toward her husband, who rarely worked and spent his free time on leisure activities. The detectives simply listened as she continued to share her thoughts and feelings. Diane acknowledged that she had always viewed Sarah as a problem because of her bipolar disorder. Despite this, Sarah continued to live with the family and had no intention of moving out. Diane revealed that for a long time, she even wished that Sarah would end her own life. Diane insisted multiple times that she did not harm her loved ones. Eventually, she made an unexpected confession to the detectives. She stated that her husband and children had been drinking antifreeze. This revelation was significant because antifreeze poisoning is very dangerous, and its symptoms can mimic those of various other chemicals, making it hard to identify. It leads to a slow and painful death. Diane confessed that she had even drunk antifreeze herself, having seen her family engage in it for some unknown reason. Of course, the detectives did not believe these absurd stories. Suspicions quickly started to be confirmed when they checked her browser search history. It turned out that well before Mark's death, she had begun searching for information on the signs and methods of poisoning, including antifreeze. She was clearly selecting the most effective and discreet means for murder, considering various medications, minerals, and essential oils that have a suppressive impact on the body. Several search queries were very provocative, for example, how to kill your husband, or how people with bipolar disorder commit and end one's own life. This indicated premeditated murder long before Mark died. When asked about all this during a follow-up meeting, Diane denied any guilt. She admitted that her husband's death did not happen as originally claimed. When the seizure occurred, she was sure that Mark would not be saved. According to Diane, she did this because she hated her husband. Everyone described the man as very good-natured. Probably, hatred stemmed from the couple's approach to the family budget. Diane simply could no longer handle the burdens at work, but she could never wait for her husband's help. She felt the same kind of hatred toward her son Sean. She could not bear to look at him. Sean was just seeking understanding and warmth from his mother, but instead, she just threw him out of the room. Every time Sean came in, he sensed that something was off, especially when he investigated his father's illness. When Mark died, she realized that she could no longer tolerate her ailing son, so she began to treat him badly every day. Diane claimed that it took only a couple of days for his body to succumb, but that was a lie. The boy was agonizingly dying for more than a week before he finally left this world. Now her attention and dissatisfaction focused on her eldest daughter, whom Diane considered the main problem in the family. Sarah was spending too much money on her education, but it was doomed to fail due to her lack of talent. Sarah dreamed of becoming a French translator, took out a student loan, and soon after graduating from college, she had to start repaying it, but there were no job prospects for Sarah, and her mother refused to pay her debts. Diane hated Sarah for not being able to find a job and solve her financial problems. For days before Sarah ended up in the hospital, her mother started adding antifreeze to her food. In the police station, Diane confessed that she sent her daughter to the hospital so quickly because she could no longer bear what was happening in her suffering. Naturally, Diane felt no pity. In reality, she had been preparing drinks in advance that were almost half antifreeze. Diane had stashed bottles of cola that could kill up to 30 people at once, according to experts. All of this was stored in the refrigerator to methodically poison her family, which seemed very alarming, especially considering that there were 2 other daughters in the house. However, Diane was not afraid that her younger daughter would accidentally take this drink, as she plans included the girl murder right after Sarah's. But to convict Diane, tangible evidence was needed. Despite the cremation of her husband and son, some fragments of Mark and Sean could still be found. After conducting autopsies, detectives suggested examining them to see if the deadly substance left traces in their bodies. Tests showed the presence of ethylene glycol, one of the main components of antifreeze. Before arresting the poisoner, the police decided to find out if she had an accomplice, as it would be difficult to carry out everything alone. It is hard to imagine how the suspect managed to keep all her close ones unaware of her intentions. The detectives arrested Diane without informing her and then questioned her second daughter, Rachel. They told Rachel that her mother had confessed to poisoning Sarah, which made Rachel extremely anxious. It was evident that she knew more than she was admitting. The detectives wanted to speak with Rachel to gain more insight into the family's situation. Even before Diane confessed, Rachel had been acting oddly, laughing and joking inappropriately about the deaths of family members, but she didn't confess to anything. As suspicions grew, the police repeatedly searched the Stott family home and discovered a diary belonging to Rachel, which proved to be highly informative. In one concerning entry, Rachel reflected that soon both her father and brother would die. She comforted herself with the thought of getting money and her father's car. Alarmingly, this entry was dated 6 months before Mark's death, indicating that Rachel was aware of her mother's troubling intentions and did not try to stop her or warn anyone. It appeared she was content with the idea of her entire family dying soon. When Rachel was shown the diary, she was clearly taken aback. She quickly broke down and admitted that she had been working with her mother, Diane, who was the poisoner, from the very start. Their collaboration began when Rachel assisted Diane in researching methods and poisons online. They discovered that antifreeze, which is sold in stores with a bitter additive to deter accidental consumption, could be purchased online for their malicious plan. Diane would prepare poisoned meals and drinks, which Rachel would then deliver to her father, brother, and even sister. In her confession, Rachel stated that they poisoned each family member up to 3 times a day. Rachel had the closest relationship with her mother and had always been the favored daughter. Just like Diane, who resented the others and viewed them as burdens. Together, they decided to eliminate the rest of the family and start a new life. A month after Mark's death, Rachel shocked her family's friends by posting on social media, "I think I haven't seen my mother so relaxed in a long time." This suggested that they were content with the outcome. Rachel shared that they had discussed each murder in detail and agreed that Mark needed to die. However, she was uncertain about Sean. She believed he didn't have to be killed and could instead be placed in a specialized treatment facility permanently. Rachel even argued with her mother about Sean, initially opposing the idea of his death but eventually conceding that it would be better to eliminate him. It seemed like a collaboration between mother and daughter in their plans. Rachel mentioned that she was surprised by Sarah's poisoning. She thought the reasons were not financial or related to deaths, but rather stemmed from a simple argument. Sarah often clashed with their mother, who found her very annoying. Regarding the 9-year-old girl, Rachel made vague remarks implying that the girl was also seen as a burden, which contributed to the desire to eliminate her as well. Diane was informed of Rachel's confession and encouraged to tell the complete truth. She agreed to do so. According to Diane, her resentment towards her husband began because he was emotionally distant and did not engage with her. She was also frustrated by his lavish spending and inability to support the family financially. Diane accused him of both physical and verbal abuse, as well as domestic violence, but these allegations were not corroborated by anyone who knew him well. In an attempt to defend herself, she claimed he had been unfaithful. However, none of Mark's close friends, whom he saw almost daily, supported these claims. Even Rachel's diary noted that their father was a devoted family man, suggesting he would harm himself before harming anyone else. Although Rachel and Diane expressed ongoing feelings of grievance, detectives believed the motive for the murders was more straightforward. Specifically, life insurance policies had been taken out on each family member, with benefits paid upon Mark's death. This would allow the widow to buy a larger, more comfortable home, marking the start of their deceptive plan. Rachel had also arranged other insurance policies that she intended to collect. Her diary revealed her concerns about the situation, which was closely examined during the hearings. Ultimately, Diane confessed that they had decided to take Sarah to the hospital while not doing the same for the other two victims because Rachel simply wanted to prevent anyone else from dying in the new house. They weren't worried about Sarah's passing. Instead, they viewed a dying loved one as a burden, just like the others. Rachel explained her behavior by sharing her deep anxieties related to her deceased brother. She vividly recalled the traumatic image of him lying on the floor, blood at his mouth, with cold, pale hands and glassy eyes. Following this, she moved into his room and often wrote in her diary about her heightened anxiety and the nightmares she experienced, in which Sean appeared. Both Rachel and Diane were arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and they were denied bail. The Lutheran Redeemer Church attended by the Stott family issued a supportive statement on behalf of all parishioners during this challenging time. Interestingly, although the pastor had reported his suspicions to the police and initiated the letter of support, he continued to pray for their souls. Rachel accepted responsibility for her actions and agreed to testify against her mother, admitting to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of attempted second-degree murder. She received 2 life sentences but could apply for parole after 42 years. During her sentencing, Rachel apologized to her sister Sarah, who survived the poisoning and underwent extensive rehabilitation to learn to walk and talk again. Later, Rachel requested a reduction in her sentence, seeking a retrial. She claimed she was intimidated by her male attorney and had not been given a psychiatric evaluation, highlighting her mental health issues. However, her appeal was denied in 2018, and she did not pursue any further efforts to lessen her sentence. Diane Stott was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Throughout the trial, she used vague language and did not fully admit her guilt. She received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In one of her final interviews, Diane claimed she was not responsible for Mark's death, attributing it to his addiction to alcohol and banned substance. She stated that he had connections with dangerous people, which led to his suffering. At that time, she had such strong feelings of hatred toward her husband that she did not want to help him. When Mark died, she felt relieved. However, there was no evidence to support Diane's claims about Mark's dependency. Her new narrative contradicted diary entries and statements from Rachel, leading others to doubt her. Sarah's life changed forever due to severe poisoning, and she will never fully recover. She now resides in a special care center and has a guardian. Sarah dreams of her late father and brother, believing they are like guardian angels watching over her. She has forgiven her mother and sister and does not hold any resentment toward them. Her strong faith keeps her devoted, and she spends a lot of time in church. Sarah hopes to achieve her dreams of becoming a French translator and visiting Paris. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ashley Dale. On a summer night in 2022, an innocent woman fell victim in Liverpool's Old Swan district, just a few miles from the city centre. At 12:41 a.m. on August 21, 2022, police received a call from a neighbor reporting a violent situation taking place next door. When the police arrived, the house was eerily quiet, with the front door clearly broken open, suggesting that a violent incident had occurred. The back door leading to the garden was left ajar. As the police cautiously entered the garden, they discovered the body of a woman. Just a few meters away, her mobile phone appeared to have slipped from her hand in her final moments. They quickly understood the gravity of the situation when they found a number of spent bullet casings scattered around the house. While one officer was investigating the crime scene, other officers arrived, waking several neighbors with the noise. Neighbors reported hearing gunshots coming from the house, while others said they heard screeching tires and car alarms going off hours before the incident. The tragic event left everyone in the area shocked. Neighbors helped the police identify the victim as 28-year-old Ashley Dale. Ashley grew up in a close-knit family and was the oldest of 3 siblings. In 2015, her younger brother was mistakenly murdered by a gang at the age of 16. Ashley was deeply affected by the death of her younger brother, which changed her outlook on life. However, she persevered, using her grief as motivation to study and eventually earn a degree in environmental conservation. This achievement led to a fulfilling career as an environmental conservationist, where she thrived and earned the respect of her colleagues. They admired not only her dedication to her work but also her genuine compassion for those around her. In her role, Ashley focused on various projects to improve living conditions and public health in the city, establishing herself as a hardworking, intelligent, and goal-oriented person. In her personal life, Ashley Dale cherished time with her family, friends, and dog. Her loved ones described her as intelligent, kind, and caring. Despite her difficult past and the pain of losing a loved one, she moved forward with determination and succeeded in her path. However, things became more complicated when she started dating Lee Harrison, a man with deep ties to the criminal world. His connections to gangs caused serious concerns for Ashley's family, who feared for her safety. Although Ashley believed that Lee was gradually changing, she still trusted him. Lee Harrison, a 28-year-old man from Liverpool, was deeply involved with many gangs and banned substance trafficking. He was particularly close to Neil Berry, a local banned substance dealer. However, their friendship began to decline in 2018 due to issues related to banned substance and trust. That year, Neil was robbed of $50,000 worth of banned substance hidden in his home in an incident orchestrated by a rival gang. Neil suspected that Lee Harrison may have informed his rivals about the incident. Although Lee denied any wrongdoing, their relationship soured, turning them into enemies. In June 2022, Lee Harrison and Ashley Dale bumped into each other at the Glastonbury Festival, rekindling old feelings. However, they also encountered a member of Neil's gang, leading to a violent brawl due to their rivalry. Neil, who was at the festival, threatened to stab Lee the next time they encountered each other. The following day, police arrested Neil and his friends for his threatening behavior. Luckily for Neil, a friend of his took the blame when a knife was found next to Neil's passport, claiming it was his. The friend, James Witham, was later arrested on suspicion of carrying a weapon, but despite the police involvement, tensions remained high following the Glastonbury incident. Ashley's life changed dramatically after that. The encounter with the gang left her feeling paranoid and fearful. Over the following weeks, her concerns about physical threats from Neil Berry grew. Not only had he threatened them during the festival, but he had also warned that he would show up at their home address. This terrifying prospect had a profound effect on Ashley, and she confided in her best friend. She expressed her anxiety in a text message, saying she can't stop thinking that something is wrong. As her anxiety grew, Ashley reached out to several friends for support. In another message, she described how distressing the situation had become and how it was affecting her mental health. Despite her efforts to calm herself, Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was ahead. Unfortunately, her intuition was correct. On the evening of August 20th, 2022, Ashley posted a photo of herself relaxing on the couch, completely unaware of what would happen after dark. Then, her car alarm suddenly went off. It was her car, but she ignored it. Frustrated, she continued to enjoy the evening and texted a friend about the siren going off again, assuming it was because of the rain. The message seemed normal, but there was a paranoid undertone. That night, she sent another message saying, "She don't know, but it looks like someone is outside." Over time, Ashley's anxiety increased, and her car alarm went off again, reinforcing her belief that someone was outside and that something was seriously wrong. On the morning of August 21st, the doorbell rang, and Ashley sensed that it was bad news. The sound echoed through the quiet house, and suddenly, the door swung open, revealing an armed man standing in the doorway. He acted quickly, opening fire without giving her a chance to react. In a panic, Ashley grabbed her phone and ran out the back door. The attacker then moved throughout the house, shooting into several rooms in an attempt to find her, hoping she was hiding in the backyard. Ashley faced her final moments with extreme fear. She could not escape the violence or her fatal injuries, and the final text messages she sent just before the attack served as a haunting reminder of her awareness of the danger. Tragically, Ashley Dale was murdered, and many suspect that Lee Harrison's connection to gang activity contributed to her death. Police discovered that all of Ashley's tires had been slashed, likely due to the attacker's actions, which had set off her car alarm. Police believe this was a deliberate attempt to lure Ashley and Lee Harrison away from their home. When her family heard her last text message, they were devastated to realize that she had sensed something was seriously wrong. Fortunately, Ashley's text message contained vital information that would help solve her murder. Police now need to piece together the evidence. However, the investigation remains tense and complicated, especially because of her boyfriend, Lee Harrison. He happened to be absent during the shooting and was very unwilling to cooperate with the police, even refusing to testify. When he was brought in for questioning, he chose to remain silent, which hampered the investigation. He changed his mobile phone number and shunned Ashley's entire family, leaving them devastated. Lee's lack of empathy only increased concerns about his possible involvement in her death. Police were surprised to discover that shortly after Ashley's death, he had gone on holiday and left the country. This raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if he had done this to avoid prosecution. While he was on holiday, they focused on the events that took place on the night of August 20th, 2022. Surveillance camera footage showed them entering a store. After making a purchase, they left and got into a gray Hyundai i3. This car later became key evidence, as another surveillance camera recorded it near Ashley's home earlier that day. Surveillance camera footage captured a car approaching Ashley's home, showing the driver surveying the area before the attack that evening. James Witham and Joseph Pierce approached Ashley's Volkswagen parked outside the family home and punctured the tires in order to set off the alarm. They attempted to lure Lee or Ashley out, but neither responded. Frustrated, they decided to retreat and come up with a new plan, which went badly wrong. An hour later, both men returned to Ashley's home, but this time one of them was armed, indicating their violent intentions. They broke into the house by forcing down the front door and saw Ashley running toward the back door. When she reached the garden door, James fired 8 shots from his pistol, hitting her in the back. After watching her fall, he went upstairs and fired 5 more shots into an empty bedroom, possibly as a threat. After a quick survey of the house and finding no one else inside, James quickly ran downstairs. Both James and Joseph then fled the scene. Fortunately, a neighbor's surveillance camera recorded the events that followed the attack. James and Joseph checked into a hotel in St. Helens to avoid detection. However, the police were able to track their movements and quickly located their car, leading to their arrest. Meanwhile, Neil Berry, who played a key role in organizing the attack, was spotted at a local golf club. Intelligence reports also indicated that he had been seen at a golf resort. The police worked together effectively to arrest him, and soon a fourth accomplice, Sean Zeiss, was arrested in connection with Ashley's murder. After the arrest and indictment of James Witham, Neil Berry, Sean Zeiss, and Joseph Pierce, the police gathered evidence, leading to the start of the trial. James Witham, who shot Ashley, initially claimed he did not intend to kill her. He argued that he intended to shoot her as a warning but accidentally hit her, asserting that her death was accidental. However, this defense was difficult to believe in court due to the overwhelming evidence, including previous threats, text messages, extensive surveillance camera footage, and numerous witness statements. When Ashley discovered that two armed men had broken into her home, she screamed in fear and tried to escape through the back door. James, who was armed, had time to aim. He fired 2 shots at Ashley, hitting her in the back as she tried to run away. It was clear that he had shot her intentionally. In November 2023, at Liverpool Crown Court, the judge sentenced James Witham, 41, Neil Berry, 26, Sean Zeiss, 28, and Joseph Peers, 29, for murder, conspiracy to murder, and unlawful possession of a firearm. The 4 were sentenced to a total of 173 years in prison. James was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 43 years, Neil to life with the possibility of parole after 47 years, Joseph to life with the possibility of parole after 41 years, and Sean to life with the possibility of parole after 42 years. The sentencing of Ashley Dales for killers has left her family with mixed emotions. Although they feel that justice has been served, it can never replace the profound loss they have experienced. Ashley Dale's tragic death has left her family in a state of grief. Ashley's mother described the loss as life-changing. Adding to their grief, Ashley's younger brother was killed by the same gang. Her father lamented, "Ashley, the eldest of my 3 children, and my son are now both gone." Despite the loss, the family has become advocates against gang violence, working to unite the community and provide support through memorials for Ashley. Meanwhile, Ashley's boyfriend, Lee Harrison, has faced no consequences and remains at large. Even after his girlfriend was murdered, he continued to sell banned substance for profit. Gun violence in the UK is low, with one of the lowest gun-related homicide rates in the world. Despite a population increase since 2011, the average number of gun homicides in the UK remains at 29 per year. The level of gang violence in the UK has only increased in recent years, possibly due to poverty and lack of education. The situation in the gang world is not improving. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Raymond Wright. On January 11, 2018, in Sacramento, California, Dean Wright grew increasingly anxious as he waited for his brother. They had planned to meet earlier that day, but Dean was unable to reach Raymond. The brothers were close, talking every day and maintaining a strong relationship. But suddenly, Raymond disappeared without a trace. There were no calls, no texts, and no activity on social media. He stopped posting photos, stopped visiting his personal page, and stopped answering the phone. Raymond, a 55-year-old carpenter, owned his own workshop and was known for being skilled at managing his business. Occasionally, he would drop off the radar, but never for more than half a day, usually due to work-related matters. This time, however, Raymond had been missing for an entire day, leaving his close friends and family deeply concerned. His sister called Dean, asking if he knew where Raymond was. Raymond's 2 daughters were also worried. They had noticed their father's unusually long absence and contacted Dean to share their concerns. The girls said they had tried calling their father all day, but their calls kept going to voicemail. Dean, growing increasingly worried, repeatedly called Raymond's number but had no success. That evening, he decided to visit Raymond's home in a suburb of Sacramento. Raymond also rented a nearby woodworking shop, which was doing well. Unfortunately, Dean found no sign of his brother in either the house or the shop. There were no indications of forced entry or robbery. Dean, who was familiar with both the house and the shop, carefully inspected the premises but found nothing unusual or any clues about Raymond's whereabouts. To add to the mystery, Raymond's pickup truck was also missing. At this point, Dean began to panic. Raymond had disappeared without any notice or plans to leave, leaving his family at a loss as to where to look. The situation left everyone worried, including Raymond's ex-wife. She and Raymond got married in June 1994. For many years, they tried to build a happy family. However, after some time living together, their differences in life views began to cause problems. Raymond was busy setting up a business, which made him completely absorbed in work and often neglectful of his daily family life. In 2001, the couple divorced. The children stayed with their mother, but Raymond remained actively involved in raising them and often visited them. After the divorce, Raymond stayed single for many years, avoiding the idea of starting a new family due to his heavy workload. In 2009, he remarried, but this marriage did not last long and ended in divorce that same year. According to relatives and friends, Raymond became extremely depressed because he was unable to maintain a personal life, largely due to his work addiction. This eventually led him to turn to alcohol. He had struggled with drinking since his early 20s but had quit when he first got married, maintaining a sober lifestyle for many years. Both his first and second wives confirmed that he had abstained from alcohol throughout their marriages. His second divorce had a profound impact on him, causing his life to spiral out of control. Struggling to cope, Raymond turned to heavy drinking, which led to serious problems. Although he was never aggressive or short-tempered, alcohol made him stubborn and reckless. In November 2011, after drinking heavily, he decided to drive under the influence. He lost control of his vehicle and caused an accident. The drivers and passengers in the other car involved were injured and filed a lawsuit against him for drunk driving. As a result, Raymond was sentenced to 18 months of probation and required to pay a substantial fine. This incident served as a wake-up call for him, and he immediately quit drinking. Determined to change, he joined Alcoholics Anonymous and attended daily meetings, fully committing to overcoming his addiction. During this time, his family and friends stood by him, offering their unwavering support. They noticed significant improvements in his behavior and overall health. It seemed as though he had found a new purpose in life, eager to make up for the time he had lost with his loved ones due to his struggle with addiction. From then on, he stopped drinking and started spending more time with his family. He even made a beautiful baby crib in his woodworking shop for his niece. He planned to spend the holidays with his family. Unfortunately, his loved ones would not have the opportunity to go on vacation with him. On January 11, 2018, Raymond disappeared without a trace. His family still has no idea where he is. When Dean visited his brother's house for the second time on January 13, 2018, he noticed a strange smell as soon as he entered. Even when Raymond was around, he had never supported smoking illegal substances. Suddenly, from the darkness of the room, a strange man emerged and confronted Dean, attempting to chase him away. After realizing Dean had no intention of leaving, the stranger ran out the back door and escaped. Confused by the incident, Dean called 911. A few minutes later, the police arrived at the scene. After conducting a thorough search of Raymond's home, the only evidence they found was a cup filled with ice and soda, complete with a lid and straw. This clue would later become crucial to the investigation. The encounter was so sudden and suspicious that the police quickly began to suspect a connection between the stranger's escape and Raymond's disappearance. Friends described Raymond as a creative and kind person. After overcoming his struggles with alcohol, his positive traits became even more prominent. No one believed he would abandon his family, especially after becoming a grandfather, a moment that brought him immense joy and happiness. Raymond was known for being uncontroversial, even during his struggles with addiction. Following this strange encounter, Dean's anxiety increased. He had never met the man before, and the stranger immediately became the prime suspect in Raymond's mysterious disappearance. However, the police had no clue as to the man's whereabouts. Raymond was officially listed as missing, and a search was launched to find him. Police speculated that he might have relapsed and resumed drinking. However, Raymond was known as one of the most determined members of Alcoholics Anonymous. He attended meetings not to seek support but to inspire others, proving that it was possible to give up alcohol completely and live a full life, even after years of heavy drinking. Police found no trace of alcohol in Raymond's home. They checked his bank card transactions, mobile phone records, and vehicle registration database but found no activity. It was as if he had vanished. None of his acquaintances had seen him during this time. A search of the house was conducted, and volunteers joined the effort, distributing flyers with Raymond's photo and details of his car. Police also sought help from the public through the media, but no information emerged. To gather more details from Dean, the police created a composite sketch of the stranger seen in Raymond's house. Unfortunately, the sketch did not produce any matches in the database. Likewise, fingerprints and DNA collected from the cup and straw did not yield any results, as they were not in the police database. After a week of unsuccessful searching, police finally located a 2016 white Ford F-250 owned by Raymond. The vehicle was found abandoned on January 21 in the North Highlands neighborhood, an area known for its high crime rate. The location was concerning because Raymond had no known connections or business in the area, making it unlikely he would have gone there willingly. The pickup truck's license plate had been removed, but Dean identified the vehicle based on its description during the search. Forensic experts determined that the vehicle had been broken into, with the doors left ajar. These findings led police to believe that something bad had happened to Raymond. After the police impounded the car, they requested assistance from the FBI. FBI agents arrived to inspect the vehicle and used advanced techniques to search for evidence, including fingerprints that might identify a potential suspect. During the inspection, they discovered faint, dark red stains on the car's carpet. Tests confirmed that the substance was human blood. To obtain a sample of Raymond's DNA, the police retrieved a toothbrush from his home. After comparing the collected materials, they determined that the blood in the car belonged to Raymond. Although the discovery was confirmed, no evidence linking the blood to a suspect was found. The investigation continued for 2 weeks, seemingly reaching a dead end. However, an unexpected event occurred that dramatically changed the case. On January 27, 2018, an unidentified vehicle sped through Sacramento at an extremely high speed. Police pursued the car but struggled to keep up as the driver reached speeds of 200 kilometers per hour, violating multiple traffic laws and endangering lives. The chase ended abruptly when the driver crashed head-on into an oncoming vehicle at high speed. Fortunately, the other driver survived, though he was pinned by the metal inside his car. He suffered only a broken leg and minor injuries. At the time, the officers had no idea how dangerous the man they had arrested truly was. The California Highway Patrol apprehended the reckless driver, who was intoxicated at the time of the incident. The man was identified as Victor Merle Gray, an individual with a troubled legal history. He was already wanted for a misdemeanor, and now a DUI charge was added to his record. His actions had clearly endangered lives, making him a significant threat. Victor was taken to the hospital for treatment under police guard and was later transferred to the Sacramento County Jail. As police delved deeper into Victor's background, they grew increasingly suspicious. It was discovered that the car he had been driving was stolen, and the license plate did not match the vehicle's registration. A database check of the license plate revealed it belonged to a 2016 Ford, the same car recently found in a crime-ridden area of the city. That car was registered to a missing person named Raymond. From that point on, Victor became the prime suspect in Raymond's disappearance. More evidence was needed to establish Victor's involvement. Unfortunately, because the police were not immediately focused on pressing Victor for information, progress stalled. He continued to fabricate stories and insisted that he had no knowledge of Raymond or how Raymond's license plate ended up on his car. For 3 months, he refused to confess until a significant breakthrough occurred. In April, DNA analysis of a straw found in a soda cup at Raymond's home matched Victor's DNA, confirming that he had indeed been in Raymond's house. Furthermore, Raymond's younger brother, Dean Wright, also identified Victor. However, this evidence was still insufficient to file formal charges. The mystery of what happened to Raymond remained unsolved. Key evidence was hidden in the car Victor had crashed. On May 8, 2018, police searched the wreckage and discovered important items that shed light on Raymond's disappearance. Amid the clutter inside the car, they found a man's hat. Dean recognized the hat and confirmed it was identical to the one Raymond had worn. Raymond's wallet and glasses were also found in the car, along with a broken cell phone that appeared to have been intentionally destroyed. However, the serial number confirmed that the phone belonged to Raymond. More important evidence was collected from Victor's cell phone. At the end of the tense chase, the phone had been thrown deep into the car's cabin and was only discovered later. On the phone, there were photos of a location that had been sent to someone named Bob. These photos were taken on January 27th, the same day as the police chase. In the messages, Victor expressed grievances and complaints directed at Bob. At the end of the messages, he stated that it was time to pay his debt and that he was expecting his money. A detailed analysis of Victor's phone also uncovered a conversation with a woman named Katie Bernard, who lived in a trailer near Raymond's carpentry shop. Victor had a brief conversation with her, trying to determine whether Raymond was alone in his shop or with someone else. It was clear that Victor knew Raymond. This conversation took place in the early morning of January 11, 2018. Geolocation data showed that Victor was only a few dozen meters away from Raymond's workshop at the time. Based on the messages, it appears that he was observing the workshop from outside. Victor contacted Katie to confirm whether Raymond was in the workshop during working hours. Katie left her house and went to see Raymond, exchanging a few words with him. She then confirmed that he was alone in the carpentry workshop. After returning home, she informed Victor that Raymond was indeed alone in the workshop. It is believed that after Katie provided this information, Victor acted and attacked Raymond just before 10 a.m. Police began to suspect that Katie might be an accomplice in the case. She was brought in for questioning in October 2018. The police immediately pressured her, as her correspondence with Victor was clear evidence of her involvement. Under pressure, Katie quickly confessed. Katie admitted that she had informed Victor that Raymond was in the workshop, but she was initially reluctant to assist in the investigation. Despite her reluctance, she became a key witness in solving the mystery of Raymond's disappearance. When asked about Bob, who was mentioned in Victor's messages, Katie revealed that he was Robert Manor, her ex-boyfriend, who was also in a relationship with Raymond. However, their relationship was far from friendly. In 2011, Raymond had been driving drunk and caused a car accident with an oncoming vehicle carrying Robert and his wife. The accident left Robert with a broken leg, requiring serious surgery. Even after treatment, Robert continued to limp and suffered from constant pain. Additionally, Robert was unhappy with the compensation he received for the accident. After the trial, Raymond was ordered to pay $275,000 in damages, but he was unable to pay the full amount at once. Raymond made monthly payments, often late, and never remitted large sums. The situation became more complicated when police ran a background check on Robert in their database. He had an extensive criminal record at the time of the incident. His primary activity was drug trafficking, which had landed him in prison on multiple occasions. Robert also had convictions for armed assault and robbery. He was clearly frustrated with Raymond's behavior and had long plotted revenge against him, whom he blamed for all the problems in his life. The constant pain he experienced served as a reminder of the accident, and his hatred and anger only grew over time. This eventually led to a carefully planned act of revenge. Katie explains that after becoming an informant for Victor, she discovered that the situation involved more than just a stolen car. She claims that she was unwittingly involved in Raymond's kidnapping and, out of fear of becoming the next target, chose to remain silent. Katie hesitantly reveals that Victor confided in her about what happened at the carpentry shop. After exchanging text messages with her, Victor armed himself and went to the shop. There, he struck Raymond on the head, knocking him unconscious. Victor then tied Raymond's hands and stuffed him into a pickup truck. He calmly drove through town to his house, located a few miles away. When Katie asked if he had killed Raymond, Victor grabbed her by the neck and warned her never to reveal their conversation. He threatened her but never disclosed what happened to Raymond. During the investigation, it was discovered that Katie was Robert's girlfriend. She was terrified of him, which made it difficult for the police to get her to talk. She knew he was dangerous and feared retaliation. Eventually, she admitted that she knew what had happened. However, Robert avoided providing details, saying only that he had taken care of everything he needed to do a long time ago. The police's main challenge was locating Raymond. Despite their best efforts, he was never found. In March 2021, Victor and Robert were charged with kidnapping and murder. However, both Victor and Robert denied any involvement in Raymond's case. They knew that admitting guilt would result in a life sentence without parole. Their lawyers argued that, since Raymond's body was never found and the case was based on circumstantial evidence, Victor and Robert could not be convicted of murder. The absence of a body allowed Victor and Robert to avoid punishment. From the start, the prosecutor's office faced several challenges, one of which was the credibility of the witnesses. Most of them had histories of drug use or legal trouble, which made their testimony questionable. Victor later admitted to kidnapping Raymond and handing him over to Robert but denied committing the murder. He revealed that his actions were motivated by a lack of payment. Victor claimed that Robert owed him $10,000 in cash for the job, but the money was never paid. The day Victor was being chased by the police for reckless driving, he drove a car full of evidence to confront Robert for cheating on him. Had Victor been paid, the confrontation might never have happened, and the criminals might have evaded justice. The trial began in March 2023, more than 5 years after Raymond went missing. Despite years of investigation, Raymond's body was never found. This made the trial particularly challenging, as proving guilt without a body was difficult for the prosecution. Meanwhile, the defense attorneys employed several strategies to influence the case. However, the prosecution had a key advantage: Katie Bernard, who agreed to testify against Robert and Victor in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Katie was not charged but played a key role in the case by providing a significant amount of incriminating evidence against Victor and Robert. Victor's confession was also crucial, as it revealed Robert's direct involvement in Raymond's disappearance and possible murder. Defense attorneys highlighted the lack of physical evidence, particularly the absence of a body. The trial lasted 1 day, and the jury deliberated for 4 hours before delivering its verdict on March 17, 2023. Both Victor Merle Gray and Robert Manor were convicted of first-degree murder and kidnapping. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While Victor refused to address the press, Robert immediately denounced the verdict as a miscarriage of justice. To this day, Robert maintains his innocence, accusing Victor and Katie of conspiring to frame him. However, prosecutors dismissed this claim as false, arguing that only Robert had a motive for revenge. Victor had never met Raymond and thus had no reason to harm him. Raymond Wright's body has never been found, leaving his grieving family unable to give him a proper burial. Despite the tragedy, Raymond's daughters have shown resilience. Though deeply affected by the loss of their father, they have worked hard to rebuild their lives. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Elizabeth Espino Vasquez. Elizabeth Vasquez Marin was born in a city located in the Cajamarca department of Peru. Her parents were 6 children. The parents loved them all dearly and worked incredibly hard to raise their children in prosperity. Elizabeth's childhood was happy and cheerful, as is often the case in a family with many children. She got along well with her 5 siblings. During her university studies, Elizabeth met a young man, Alejandro Espino, whom she married in 1987. A year later, they had their first and only daughter, whom they named Elizabeth Espino Vasquez, affectionately called Alida by everyone. By that time, both Alida's parents were balancing family life with their careers. Elizabeth began to develop her career as a lawyer, studying 2 majors simultaneously at university in Lima, while her husband was also working toward his career as a lawyer. Years later, his career advancement led him to the position of prosecutor in the fight against corruption. The hectic pace of life left them with almost no time to care for their little girl, who, during the first 4 years of her life, was raised by her grandparents on her mother's side. They provided her with the love that her parents could not, and additionally, Alida grandparents' youngest daughter was Alida's age, allowing them to grow up like sisters. Every birthday of Alida's was celebrated like a grand holiday and served as a wonderful reason for the whole family to gather. At every family event, Alida was always by her aunt's side. The 2 girls constantly played pranks together and were never scolded. Instead, they were spoiled and had their wishes fulfilled, which led to them being jokingly labeled as spoiled. When Alida turned 4, her parents decided, in her best interests, to move to the Lima department since it was time for her to start kindergarten and they wanted her to have access to quality education from an early age. Moreover, moving to the capital afforded Alida other privileges. To make up for the time she could not spend with her only daughter, her mother showered Alida with various gifts, leading her to live like a queen. She had the best toys, designer clothes, trips abroad, and a top-notch education. Additionally, Maureen indulged all her whims. Despite this, the little girl often felt out of place, unable to rely on her mother's company, who was busy managing several businesses. Nevertheless, Maureen tried to spend all her free time with Alida. Eventually, they grew so close that they resembled best friends. Unfortunately, this closeness vanished without a trace when Alida reached her teenage years. In an instant, she transformed into a problematic teen, and the first warning sign was her plummeting school performance, despite having always been the best student. Shortly thereafter, constant quarrels with her mother ensued. Alida's resentment began to fester because everyone around her admired her mother, specifically, her mother's success at work, beauty, and gentle demeanor. Alida did not possess the same physical attributes as her mother, which consumed her with strong jealousy. At every opportunity, she would question why she looked so different from her mother. In an attempt to reconnect with her daughter, Elizabeth continued to indulge her desires and shower her with gifts. Among these requests were plastic surgeries and other measures aimed at enhancing Alida's beauty. Elizabeth supported and financed these efforts in hopes that Alida's confidence and self-esteem would improve, but the girl remained unsatisfied. Her hatred for her mother only deepened. Elizabeth and Alejandro's divorce in 2007 only exacerbated the situation. Alida blamed her mother for it all, and her resentment intensified. Around the same time, Alida began dating a young man named Fernando Gonzalez Asenjo, whom she met at a Mormon church in the San Isidro area. Few people knew that Fernando attended the church solely to exploit unsuspecting young believers with considerable money. His scheme was simple. He would tell wealthy young women that his family was very poor, that he lived alone with his mother, and that his father had abandoned the family when he was just a small boy. By pretending to be a good son, a victim, he evoked pity from the girls and gained their affection. Alida was no exception. In reality, Fernando was a problematic individual. He had no job, didn't even try to study, wanted an easy life. Fernando understood that Alida would easily succumb to manipulation and would support him, while Alida did not realize that Fernando was simply using her. When Elizabeth found out that her daughter was dating a young man from the church, she was happy because she thought he was a hardworking and good boy. Additionally, when Alida talked about the difficulties that Fernando had allegedly faced, Elizabeth decided to help him get his life on track. She rented him an inexpensive apartment so that he could live away from his mother and paid for his schooling, during which he was supposed to study business so that later, Maureen could offer him a job in one of her companies. However, Fernando did not take advantage of this opportunity and attended only 2 classes. When Elizabeth learned about this, she was very upset. Understanding that Fernando was dear to her daughter, she decided to give him another chance and offered him a job as a manager's assistant. Fernando missed that opportunity as well. He was fired after losing a check for a substantial amount of money, even though he was simply supposed to deliver it from one place to another. Furthermore, Fernando did not pay Elizabeth rent for the apartment, despite their agreement that she would let him live there for a minimum price, not for free. This behavior convinced Elizabeth that he was with Alida only for her money. She forbade her daughter from continuing the relationship, thinking she could break them apart. Maureen decided to send Alida to the United States for a vacation at her younger sister's house, with whom Alida had been very close in childhood. This decision turned out to be perfect. She hoped her daughter could meet other boys and forget about Fernando. Ultimately, this plan did not work, and the couple continued their long-distance relationship. Just a couple of months later, Alida returned to Lima to start studying at the law school of the Peruvian University of Applied Sciences. At the same time, Fernando moved to another apartment and began living alone, but he was able to afford this not because he found a job, but because Alida was paying all his bills. She received this money from her mother, who gave her about $450 a month for her university expenses. This amount, of course, was not enough for the lavish lifestyle Fernando hoped for. Therefore, to please her boyfriend, Alida snuck into her mother's room and stole her wallet. Elizabeth soon noticed the missing money, which led to a fierce argument between mother and daughter. Alida denied taking the money, but by that time, Elizabeth suspected that her daughter was still seeing Fernando, and the situation with the money helped confirm this. Intending to find out the truth, Elizabeth checked her daughter's computer. She found her correspondence with Fernando. In the messages, she also saw that Fernando was demanding rent payments, meals from expensive restaurants, and branded clothing from Alida. This situation was the last straw for Elizabeth. In turn, Alida interpreted this as a declaration of war. By July 2009, Elizabeth reduced the amount of money she gave her daughter for expenses and began to keep track of every penny she spent. Of course, all of this drove Alida to despair, as she could no longer indulge her boyfriend's desires. Alida's dissatisfaction grew. She wanted money, power, and freedom. She planned to achieve this at any cost, even ignoring the fact that Elizabeth was doing all of this for her sake. It was then that Alida decided to cross all boundaries and began to devise a plan to get rid of her own mother. Alida's plan was to inherit her mother's fortune, which was estimated at $4 million at that time. Additionally, Elizabeth had investments in the insurance market, owned several companies, and had several insurance policies, which Alida did not suspect. Little did she know that her mother was one step ahead in her efforts to protect her daughter from Fernando. She had rewritten her will, and in the event of her death, all her assets would go to Elizabeth's father, who would be obliged to take care of Alida. As if foreseeing what was about to happen, Elizabeth met with her parents, brothers, and sisters to inform them of her decision. She told them she was doing this for Alida, because she feared for her safety and her daughter's safety, having realized that Fernando was an unreliable person capable of causing harm for his own desires. Unfortunately, Maureen was not mistaken. While Elizabeth was doing everything possible for Alida's well-being, she was unhappy that Elizabeth did not accept her relationship with Fernando, and that Elizabeth had taken away some privileges. Alida planned to stage a kidnapping to escape with her boyfriend and use the money obtained to gain the freedom she so desperately wanted. Greed, envy, beauty, constant quarrels, the thirst for money, and Fernando's bad influence led Alida to devise a plan to murder her mother. Enlisting the help of her boyfriend Fernando and a friend of Fernando's named Jorge Cornejo Ruiz, who was 22 years old, to help them commit the crime that was to take place on the night of January 26, 2010. On that day, Alida went to work with Elizabeth and asked her for about $3 supposedly to print some university assignments. In fact, she spent that money to take a taxi home, let Fernando and his friend into their house. The guys hid in Elizabeth's room and were to wait for her return from work. Alida told them that when Elizabeth entered the room, they should immediately strangle Elizabeth as they had previously agreed. After talking to her accomplices, Alida returned to work with Elizabeth. Eventually, Alida and Elizabeth returned home around 10:30 p.m. Alida deliberately made a small noise so that Fernando and Jorge could hear. Unsuspecting, Elizabeth went up to her room and turned on the light. At that moment, Fernando, standing behind her, began to strangle Elizabeth while his accomplice Jorge held Elizabeth by her legs. Elizabeth managed to break free for a moment and resist, but Fernando quickly regained his footing, subdued her. When it was over, Alida went to the kitchen where the 19-year-old maid, Maria Liliana Huaman Chucolin, was at the time. She ordered Maria to go to her room and lock herself in there. After that, Alida returned to Elizabeth's room. While Fernando and Jorge held her down, Alida lunged at Elizabeth, began demanding money from her, forcing her to give the password to the accounts or hand over the safe's key. Until that moment, Elizabeth thought that Fernando was acting alone to take revenge on her, but upon seeing that her daughter was involved in the attack, she gathered her strength to lunge at Alida. Elizabeth managed to grab Alida by her arms and scratch her chest. When the fight was almost over, Elizabeth kicked her daughter several times in the legs. This last act enraged Alida, after which she struck her mother severely, pressed a pillow to her face to suffocate her. When Elizabeth stopped breathing, the criminals proceeded with their plan. Fernando and Jorge took the body, moved it to the trunk of Elizabeth's car. Meanwhile, Alida went to distract the guard. She talked to him and asked him to go to the pharmacy to buy some medicine. Thus, they managed to remove the body. They planned to hide it and the car to stage everything as if it were a kidnapping. The screams and sounds of the struggle were heard by the maid, which scared her greatly, but she could do nothing to help Elizabeth as Alida had locked her in and she had no way to escape the room on her own. Early in the morning at 5 a.m., Maria woke up and made orange juice for Elizabeth as she always did. At that time, Alida appeared and told her to drink the juice because her mother had already gone to work. After that, she went to her mother's workplace, where Elizabeth's accountant was already present. Alida told her that the criminals had contacted her and claimed that Elizabeth had been kidnapped. Elizabeth's accountant immediately blocked all of her boss's bank accounts to prevent the criminals from carrying out bank transfers. Jessica also noticed that Alida looked worried, that there were bruises on her arms and legs, but she did not pay much attention to it as at that moment she was only thinking about Elizabeth. She immediately reported the kidnapping to law enforcement while Alida called her relatives to tell them what had happened. When she returned to the office, she was shocked by the state of her workspace. There was chaos everywhere and many documents were scattered across the desk. At that moment, she did not notice that several important documents, including a will that Elizabeth claimed had been made a few months earlier, were missing. This will then caused a legal dispute between her relatives. While the police began investigating the disappearance from the tourist area, a horrifying message came in. An abandoned car had been found with a lifeless body inside. The body was taken to the morgue, where forensic experts conducted analyses and immediately established the cause of death as suffocation, discovering traces of violence on various parts of her body. The news of Elizabeth's death shocked her family and those around her. Everyone who knew and loved her could not believe that such a hardworking and kind woman could have been killed in such a terrible way. At the funeral, Alida appeared to be grief-stricken and inconsolable. In the following days, she displayed only cold behavior and a vacant gaze, as though she were not at all affected by her mother's death. Furthermore, she provided nonsensical explanations for what had happened that day. Her grandmother and grandfather felt that they no longer knew the girl they had raised, loved so much in her childhood. The investigation began by examining threats that Elizabeth's ex-husband had received a few months prior. He was a talented lawyer and at that time worked as a prosecutor fighting corruption. Investigators speculated that a possible reason for the disappearance could have been his significant role in the arrest of the mafia and a well-known banned substance dealer. He had powerful enemies, and their involvement seemed obvious, but the investigation in that direction led nowhere. The detectives assigned to the case then decided to focus on a person who could have been the organizer of the crime. By that time, enough evidence and conflicting witness statements had been gathered, indicating that the perpetrator could have been Alida, Elizabeth's only daughter. Despite her display of mourning at the funeral, the police had lingering suspicions, as during the interrogations, Alida provided contradictory stories. During her first interrogation, she stated that she had come home late in the evening and immediately gone to her room to study. At 2 a.m., she realized she was hungry and went down to the kitchen. When she returned, the door to her mother's room was locked, but the light was still on inside. Alida recounted that her mother had left for work early on the morning of January 27th, after which she received a call from the criminals informing her that her mother had been taken hostage and that they would release her in exchange for a ransom. Detectives managed to establish that this call never occurred. Instead, they discovered that on that day, Alida had made numerous calls to Fernando. Following this finding, they became the primary suspects in the case. When Alida was called back for questioning, she claimed that she had never argued with her mother, a statement confirmed by her father, who at the time was already a district judge and the chairman of the Supreme Court of Amazonas. He stated that their family was very close, even despite the divorce, and insisted that the reason for Elizabeth's death was revenge from her enemies, although this version had already been dismissed by authorities. Additionally, there was other evidence against Alida and Fernando. Although the criminals had wiped the fingerprints, a luminol test revealed that Elizabeth's blood had been found throughout the house. A crucial element in the investigation was the testimony of the maid, who described that terrible night, noting that she heard Elizabeth's cries for help but could not assist her because Alida had locked her in. She added that in the morning, she performed her household duties, but Alida came and said that her mother had already left for work. There is also the testimony of the guard. Later, Elizabeth's best friend testified that mother and daughter often had intense arguments, and sometimes Alida even attacked her mother. Considering all the gathered evidence and testimonies, on February 9th, the Homicide Investigation Department of the National Police of Peru appealed to the on-duty judge for the preliminary arrest of 3 suspects in this crime. Alida was arrested around noon. Just a couple of hours later, her accomplices, Fernando and Jorge, were also apprehended. During Alida's arrest, she was accompanied by her father, Alejandro Espino, and 2 defense attorneys. After Alida was placed in custody, she underwent a forensic examination, during which it was determined that she had injuries on her hands and feet that had occurred up to 10 days prior, around the time of the crime. After intensive interrogations, the first to admit responsibility was Fernando, followed by Jorge. Consequently, Alida felt she had no choice but to confess her guilt as well. Alida revealed that on the night of the maid, she distracted the guard, allowing her accomplices to break into Elizabeth's room. Furthermore, she stated that she cleaned up the crime scene and that it was Fernando who took Elizabeth's life. Alida did not conceal her motives, stating that she acted out of frustration with the imposed rules and the prohibitions on seeing her boyfriend. Meanwhile, the head of the forensic department emphasized the composure of the criminals, who confessed to committing their actions fully aware of the consequences and without being under the influence of alcohol or illegal substances. The criminals also revealed that they had planned to take Elizabeth's life several months prior when her relationship with Alida became unbearable. However, this was not the only motive. Another goal was to collect a life insurance policy worth $100,000. As new details of the case emerged and were covered in the media, public sentiment towards Alida deteriorated day by day, peaking when it became known that she was the one who initiated the crime that led to her mother's death. However, Alida's grandfather decided to visit his granddaughter in prison, hoping to hug and forgive her, as she was his blood. To his surprise, during one of these visits, Alida began to behave coldly towards him, insulting him, even telling him not to return. This occurred in March, 2 months after Elizabeth's death. Following this, he stated that Alida was now dead to him and immediately filed a lawsuit to exclude her from the inheritance due to her unworthy behavior, intending to prevent Alida from receiving her mother's inheritance. Consequently, a legal battle over the inheritance began between Alida and her family. Despite Elizabeth's relatives assuring that there was a will in favor of Alida's grandfather, this document, as previously mentioned, mysteriously disappeared from Elizabeth's office and from the city registrar's office. The accountant who worked with Elizabeth noted that the only person with access to Elizabeth's documents was her own daughter. By May of that same year, Alida initiated the process of the will from prison in an attempt to inherit her mother's estate, but she was unaware that she was not the only heir. Alejandro also filed a lawsuit, claiming that he and Elizabeth were not divorced but had merely decided to live separately and, in his opinion, he had the right to receive half of the estate as her widower. Liliana Vasquez Marin asserted that her sister and Alejandro divorced in 2007 with mutual consent and that both already had new partners. Alejandro's response was swift. He confirmed that they had indeed begun the divorce process but never finalized it, as they were concerned about their daughter and thought that finalizing the divorce might significantly impact her. Amid this inheritance dispute, another brother of Elizabeth intervened to assert that when they were handling the funeral, Alejandro was only interested in money. Additionally, he emphasized that it was too suspicious that two key documents in this case, the divorce certificate and the will in which his sister bequeathed all her property to their father, had gone missing. He also reported that Alida's father, taking advantage of his position and influence as a lawyer, publicly stated that his daughter would be sentenced to only 8 years in prison and would be released on parole after 3 years. Faced with these issues, the family lawyer provided the court with an executive document recognizing a foreign judgment, which stated that Elizabeth had divorced in the United States by mutual consent and that this document was valid in Peru. Over the next several months, Alida attempted to launch a campaign against her grandfather, choosing to slander him. She even dared to claim that he and one of her uncles were responsible for Elizabeth's death. The family was easily able to debunk these statements, asserting that Alida did this solely to harm her grandfather. Disappointment and grief gradually took a toll on his health and well-being, leading to his demise on December 27, 2011. He suffered a heart attack that resulted in his death. His remains were buried at the Campos Cemetery in Huapi, alongside those of his daughter, Elizabeth. After Alida's grandfather's death, the Vasquez family increased the number of lawsuits Alida to eliminate the possibility of them inheriting wealth. In the midst of the battles for inheritance, a lawsuit was simultaneously ongoing against Alida and her two accomplices for the death of Elizabeth. The first court hearing was scheduled for April 12 and was to take place in the 3rd Criminal Chamber for prisoners. However, the hearing was postponed until the 24th of that month after the court denied Alejandro's request to participate as a civil party in the process. When the time finally arrived for the first hearing, the suspects appeared in court dressed in black, with black nails, black pants, and a purple blouse. Alida attempted to appear calm, but her facade crumbled as soon as Ivan Melgar, the senior assistant prosecutor from the 9th prosecution of Lima, began mentioning more than 15 witnesses who would be called during the proceedings. Among these witnesses were Elizabeth's maid and the suspects, who were asked to testify about their state of mind the day before the crime was committed. The prosecution requested a repeated psychiatric evaluation for Alida after her defense requested to declare her innocent on the grounds that she had been suffering from bipolar disorder since 2007. During the debates, the deputy chief prosecutor officially filed for 30 years of imprisonment for her and the 2 other defendants, in addition to a payment of $27,000 as damages in civil proceedings. After the prosecution presented evidence, she pleaded not guilty and refused to claim any early dismissal or sentencing. On May 14, 2012, Fernando González Asenjo was sentenced to 28 years of imprisonment, and a week later, on May 21, Jorge Cornejo Ruiz received a similar sentence. While testifying, Alida accusing her former partner and his friend of planning, carrying out the attack on her mother. She also insisted that they had been hired by her uncle, who allegedly had connections to the illegal banned substance trade. This statement was supported by her father, who stated that the real criminals had exploited his daughter's mental illness to cause Elizabeth's death. Neither the victim's family nor the public believed this assertion. The trial took an unexpected turn when Fernando testified in court. During his testimony, he stated that he and Jorge had decided to commit the crime after Alida invited them to her home on January 26, 2010. Faced with this unexpected situation, the prosecution noted that Fernando's testimony contradicted his earlier statements made during the investigative phase, where he had claimed that he, Jorge, and Fernando had jointly planned the crime. Now, he had retracted his words. Given the circumstances, the prosecution announced that a confrontation would take place among the three suspects, mandated Jorge and Fernando to testify in court as witnesses. Eventually, Jorge provided testimony that Alida had offered him $20,000 not to speak about the events of that fateful night. Details also emerged regarding a plan devised by Fernando, in which the criminal group was supposed to go missing along with her mother, but Jorge asserted that he did not agree to be part of this plan. The Jorge's lawyer noted that it was established that his client did not participate in either planning the events that led to Elizabeth's death or in carrying out the attack. Ultimately, Alida made a shocking statement, saying that she did not regret that Fernando killed her mother, claiming she had clearly seen it and did not want to take responsibility for what he did. The lawyer also assured that Fernando's statements were spontaneous and that he had received no bribes to change his original statement. The maid, Maria Liliana, also noted that Elizabeth was against her daughter's relationship with Fernando because Elizabeth considered him a slacker. She reiterated her previous statements regarding Alida's confession and Alejandro's threats. After these testimonies, the prosecution and oversight body requested a copy of her statements to initiate an investigation against Senior Judge Alejandro in connection with the alleged threats he made toward Maria. At the time the appeal was initiated, the court granted Alida's request to recognize her as the heir to her deceased grandfather's estate. This caused outrage in the Vasquez family, who filed an appeal against the aforementioned ruling. According to the family's lawyer, it was proven that the accused was involved in the events that led to her mother's death, and that was sufficient to strip her of any chance of inheriting property from their family. Even greater uncertainty in the judicial proceedings was introduced by 4 experts tasked with establishing the psychological profile of Alida. As they reached contradictory conclusions, 2 stated that she actually had bipolar disorder affecting her ability to think clearly, while the other 2 declared that the disorder altered her emotional capabilities but not her consciousness. Consequently, she was very well aware and understood what she was doing, and she was fully responsible for her actions. One of the psychologists provided the court with drawings by Alida and printed statistics indicating that she had an above-average IQ, which suggested that she could manipulate others. Based on the results of the psychological testing, the prosecution claimed that the bipolar disorder referred to by Alida's defense was not an illness but an emotional disorder. Therefore, she should be deemed sane and receive a strict punishment. At one of the final hearings, expert testimony was presented by the specialist who examined Elizabeth. He reported that the bloodstains found in Elizabeth's car suggested that she may have still been alive when she was placed there. During his closing arguments, the senior assistant prosecutor stated that at the time of the crime, the accused was not suffering from bipolar disorder, was stable, and most likely had carefully planned everything in advance. After countless attempts by Alida, Elizabeth Espino Vasquez, to distort what happened and deny the truth, on December 24, 2012, she was found guilty of murdering her mother, Elizabeth Vasquez Marin, and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. While the judge read the sentence, she pulled out an icon and, with tears in her eyes, began to pray, tearfully declaring that the sentence was unfair. For several minutes, she spoke with her lawyer, who stated that he would appeal the verdict. The lawyer continued to insist that various clinical and psychological analyses conducted by renowned specialists showed that Alida suffered from an emotional affective disorder, and this should be taken into account during the review of the sentence. By that time, Alida was still listed as a potential heir to her grandfather's and mother's estates, was therefore continuing to process the necessary documentation to inherit them. In light of this, the Vasquez family demanded that the Fifth World Court make a ruling on the matter, as the procedure had been halted in 2011. However, over the next 8 years, all attempts by the Vasquez family to obtain a judicial decision on this matter were unsuccessful. On January 21, 2021, Alida received news of her father Alejandro's death from natural causes. To this day, legal proceedings regarding whether the Vasquez family can exclude Alida from the list of heirs are ongoing. The entire Vasquez family has stated that this situation has been a true torment for them. This case shook all of Peru, revealing that there are people who, in pursuit of their goals, do not hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way, even their own mother. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Leslie Reeves. On November 20, 2021, Leslie Reeves and Chris Smith met at a bar where Chris was performing as the lead singer of a band. After their initial meeting, Chris invited Leslie back to the bar for a friendly get-together. What started as a casual dinner quickly turned into something more, as they both felt a strong attraction to each other. They met again on November 24, 2021, just before Thanksgiving, at their favorite bar. The bar was packed, but they had made reservations. Those who were there that night remembered Chris and Leslie as a fun couple, full of laughter and conversation, with no signs of conflict between them. Leslie and Chris then got ready and went to his house. Leslie felt comfortable being alone with Chris, as he had made a positive impression on her. Additionally, Leslie was very good at defending herself, which made her feel safer when visiting him. Chris lived on a farm 100 kilometers away from the bar in Farmer City, Illinois, USA. At around 10 p.m., Leslie sent her friend Nanette Stuber a text message saying that something was wrong, but she did not provide any further details. Coincidentally, Nanette was asleep at the time and did not read the message until the next morning. This turned out to be the last message sent by Leslie Reeves. When Nanette woke up, she was eager to talk to Leslie about her date with Chris. Instead, she was alarmed to see Leslie's disturbing message. Nanette texted back asking what had happened, but Leslie did not respond and ignored all attempts to contact her. This lack of communication made Leslie's friend even more worried. Fortunately, Leslie had shared Chris's address, so Nanette decided to go there to check on her. She headed toward Farmer City while also calling the police. Knowing that the trip would take over an hour, she planned to request a welfare check on Leslie. As Nanette approached the farm, she saw another car parked nearby. It belonged to Chris's friend, who had been trying to contact the band's lead singer and wanted to check on him. They decided to explore the area around the house and look inside. As they approached from behind, they noticed that the door was broken and there was a shattered window. Looking inside, they saw a foot on the floor. Chris's friend quickly ran to his car, grabbed his phone, and called emergency services to report a dead body in the house. When the police arrived, they discovered even more heartbreaking scenes. Chris was the first to be brought out. He was alive but severely injured, covered in blood and struggling to breathe. Doctors feared he might not survive the trip to the hospital. The second victim, a woman who had accompanied him from the bar, was taken out. Chris was a local celebrity, the lead singer of a band. Forensic investigators and the sheriff began their work at the farm, while Nanette waited outside in her car. Confused and anxious, she tried to figure out what had happened to her friend, but no one would provide information about Leslie. Overcome with anxiety, Nanette went to the police to share vital information. She explained that the night before Thanksgiving, Leslie had gone on a date with a man named Chris, the first person to be taken from the house. When the police asked to see a photo of her friend, Nanette showed them the pictures on her phone. Then the police delivered the heartbreaking news Leslie had been shot and was dead. However, Chris was still alive but in critical condition and was rushed to the medical center for surgery. Although his condition had stabilized slightly, it was still serious. Police conducted a thorough search of the crime scene, Chris's car, and his personal belongings. They focused particularly on the communication equipment in the home. The scene revealed numerous damaged items, including a broken back door, shattered windows, and a displaced refrigerator, An overturned table and scattered chairs indicated a struggle. Initially, police believed that Chris had attacked Leslie in his own home, leading to a fight that left both of them injured. Leslie died almost instantly, making Chris a suspect. However, further investigation revealed that no weapon was found at the crime scene, which raised suspicions. It appeared that the attacker had been armed. The police concluded that Chris was unlikely to be the attacker, as neither Leslie nor Chris had weapons. Additional findings confirmed that Chris did not attack Leslie. A burned pizza was found, indicating that the couple had planned to cook and eat dinner together that evening before the attack. Evidence suggested that the attacker had come to their home, and that they had attempted to defend themselves. Chris was shot first while Leslie fought back. The chaos around her suggested a struggle. She had been shot once in the head, resulting in her death. Police discovered 2 silver bullet casings from a Ninem handgun, one in the kitchen near Chris's body and one in the living room next to Leslie's. To piece together what had happened, police began investigating Leslie and Chris's backgrounds. Chris Smith was a friendly 48-year-old man who had been divorced less than a year before the shooting. Chris worked in pool construction and also played music with his band. He was known in the community as a kind and dedicated person who devoted himself to singing. Almost everyone recognized him by name and face. He had no legal problems, no history of violence, drug use, or involvement in criminal activity. Leslie believed Chris would be the ideal partner for family life. At the time, Chris lived in a large house in a nearby town with his mother and sister. They described him as a workaholic, spending all of his free time focused on his career. The family was close and deeply saddened by what happened to Chris. They had a dog named Tiki, who doctors said played a key role in Chris's survival that night. During the 12 hours Chris bled out before he was discovered, Tiki lay on top of him, keeping him warm. Experts believe the dog sensed Chris's distress and helped him through the situation. Leslie Reeves, a 40-year-old mother of 2, lived about an hour south of Farmersville. She was divorced and had a master's degree in engineering. However, she chose a different path and became a Pilates and women's self-defense instructor. Leslie was very active and used her social media channels to promote her work. When the police asked about potential suspects in Leslie's attack, Nanette provided the most valuable information. Nanette knew Leslie well and recalled that one person who had acted inappropriately was her ex-boyfriend, Robert Tarr. Leslie had ended their relationship long before the attack, but Robert responded by stalking her. He became so persistent that she was forced to block him from her emails, text messages, and phone calls. Although Leslie tried to cut off contact, Robert refused to accept her decision. News of the crime spread throughout the area, eventually reaching a close friend of Leslie's who lived near the city. She confirmed what she had heard and identified Robert Tarr as the only person capable of carrying out such an attack. Leslie's close friend quickly contacted the police to report him, and suspicions against Robert continued to grow. Meanwhile, Chris remained in the hospital. X-rays showed that a bullet had entered his brain between the 2 hemispheres. If it had traveled just 2 mm deeper, he would have died. When his family learned of the incident, his mother and sisters rushed to the medical center to assist him. The trip took 2 hours, during which they were very worried about him. Chris's relationship with Leslie was short-lived and somewhat unexpected, so most of his relatives were unaware of it. While the doctors worked hard, they had to remove part of Chris's skull to access the soft tissues, remove some of the bone fragments that had penetrated his brain, and extract the bullet. It was time to meet Robert Tarr, a divorced father of 3 living in Collinsville. Thanks to Nanette, they were able to contact him and arrange a meeting. From the beginning, Robert did not question why the police were interested in him and agreed to come to the station without a lawyer. Although the deceased's best friend, Leslie, reported that she had broken up with Robert, he insisted that they were still together, although he admitted that their relationship had problems. Robert denied any involvement in the crime, stating that he had never been to Farmersville and did not know Chris Smith. When questioned about his alibi, he recounted his activities the day before Thanksgiving, claiming that he spent most of the day with a friend until 6:30 p.m., after which he returned home and met only his daughter. However, his alibi was not convincing. There were many holes in his story, and no one could confirm his whereabouts at certain times, making it seem as if he was trying to hide something. The shooting occurred at 1 a.m., while Robert insisted that he had been home long before. Robert's daughter, who was brought to the police station and partially supported his account, said that he had come home around 6:30 p.m., left, and returned around 9 p.m. Robert appeared very upset during questioning. He cried and said that he missed Leslie. His daughter was confused about the situation. The police believed he left to follow Leslie and saw her with a new man named Chris. He stayed with his daughter until she went to bed around 10 p.m. However, at around 2:45 a.m., Robert's daughter woke up to noises in the house. Robert was frantically doing laundry and kept saying he couldn't sleep, which raised suspicions. Robert's daughter also mentioned that her father owned a gun. While the two were at the police station, officers searched their home and discovered a gun. When they showed it to Robert's daughter, she realized that her father had used another gun just the day before. The police checked Robert's movements to verify his alibi. They found that he had filled up his gas tank at a gas station near Farmer about 15 to 20 minutes before the murder, and they obtained a receipt as evidence. Robert was caught on surveillance cameras at various locations as he traveled to the city. This evidence contradicted Robert's earlier claims that he had never heard of Farmersville and had never been there. He was eventually arrested after being caught lying, which allowed the police to detain him and prevent him from fleeing. Chris's family was relieved, as they feared the criminal might return to harm the survivor. Just a day after the arrest, more circumstantial evidence against Robert continued to emerge, and the police believed they had the right man. Robert's lawyer quickly appeared on television to discuss the case, asserting his client's innocence. Robert's story changed rapidly. He claimed that at 6:40 p.m., Leslie called him out of the blue, asking for a ride to a friend's house in Farmersville. He said he arrived at 7:30 p.m., dropped Leslie off near Chris's house, and then returned home. He explained his earlier lies by saying that he was afraid of attracting police attention. Robert claimed that he had simply picked up Leslie and left, insisting that he had not shot anyone. However, the timeline did not match his daughter's account. He stated that there was tension between his daughter and Leslie, so he did not want to worry her any further. In contrast, Robert's daughter described Leslie as a kind woman, and they quickly formed a close bond. Meanwhile, Robert's web of lies continued to grow. He attempted to challenge the police's theories while speaking to reporters, arguing that the police had found no glass or blood in the car he was driving, nor was there any other evidence linking him to the murders. Additionally, no DNA samples from the victims were found at the crime scene or in his car. Robert's defense attorneys used these points to support their case. The police desperately needed physical evidence. Ideally, a pistol containing the bullets used in the crime to conduct ballistics testing. Unfortunately, their initial search was unsuccessful. However, a few days later, Robert's daughter contacted the police, stating that she had found the gun he used in the attack. The weapon was safely stored in a thick Ziploc bag and hidden in the yard, possibly to prevent rain damage, suggesting that the perpetrator intended to use it again. The bag contained numerous fingerprints belonging to Robert, making the discovery significant to the investigation. Despite this evidence, Robert maintained his innocence and attempted to manipulate the facts. Although there were numerous fingerprints on the Ziploc bag, there were none on the gun itself, indicating that Robert had attempted to clean it. However, he was not clever enough to dispose of it. Further analysis revealed that he had not cleaned the gun properly, as tiny drops of Leslie's blood were found on it. To justify himself, Robert began telling a story that the gun actually belonged to Leslie, and that she had asked him to hide it, He claimed that Leslie had learned how to use a gun. However, her shooting instructor, a friend of Leslie's, refuted Robert's story, stating that he had never seen the weapon with her. Leslie's friend insisted that Leslie did not carry a gun for self-defense on that date. If she had had a gun with her, the attacker would not have been able to leave alive. She would have been able to defend herself. Despite everything, Robert maintains his innocence. The outcome depends on the survivor's memory. Chris Smith, the prosecution's main witness, survived the brutal attack but remains in a drug-induced coma. Doctors report some positive progress, but it is too early to make any predictions about his recovery. While waiting for Chris to regain consciousness, Robert's cellmate approached the police with a disturbing confession. He revealed that Robert tried to hire him as a hitman to kill Chris Smith and the chief prosecutor for $110,000, even paying $10,000 up front. In response, security at the hospital was increased. Investigations were conducted thoroughly, but no evidence supporting the attack was discovered. Robert claims that he never considered hiring a hitman. He stated that he gave $10,000, but it was to bail out a friend. However, this raises the question of why Robert would hand over such a large sum to someone he barely knew. Regardless, Robert's situation only worsened. To clarify the matter, they had to wait until Chris regained consciousness. Thankfully, he opened his eyes in early January 2022, about 2 months after the attack. This marked the beginning of his long recovery process. Chris had to relearn basic skills such as walking, eating, and talking. He approached the rehabilitation process with determination, demonstrating strong physical abilities from the start. Unfortunately, his cognitive recovery did not go smoothly. After waking from the coma, he faced significant memory gaps, especially regarding the night of the attack. He couldn't even remember who Leslie was, or recall anything about that evening. Additionally, Chris had to live with a bullet lodged in his brain. Doctors couldn't remove the bullet due to the risks involved. They found that attempting surgery could cause damage to the surrounding area, potentially leading to serious consequences. As he continued to deal with memory issues, Robert's trial was set for April 2024. At the start of the hearing, prosecutors claimed that Robert had intentionally gone to Chris's house to kill Leslie Reeves after seeing them together that evening. Evidence showed that he had been following Leslie throughout the night, suspecting she was with someone else. When he discovered that she was dating a new man, he became extremely angry. Police found numerous text messages between him and his best friend, in which Robert frequently expressed his frustration with Leslie, particularly that evening. It was evident that he was affected by the situation. Until the very end, he still believed he was in a relationship with her and viewed Leslie's date with Chris and their trip home as a betrayal. After witnessing how happy Leslie and Chris were together, Robert returned home, where his daughter found him crying. Knowing that the couple had gone to Farmersville, he grabbed a gun and went to Chris's house. Robert entered through the back door, but was quickly spotted, leading to an attempt to stop him. A struggle ensued, resulting in a broken window. Robert then armed himself. Leslie and Chris attempted to defend themselves by pushing the refrigerator to block their path. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. Chris tried to shield Leslie but was shot, and shortly after, Leslie suffered the same fate. Robert's attorneys attempted to counter the prosecutor's claims. The defense emphasized the lack of direct evidence, portraying the case as a fabrication. They argued to the jury that the investigation was focused solely on accusing Robert of assaulting 2 people. In fact, there was no evidence at the crime scene directly linking Robert to the crime. Chris, a key witness, could not recall the events of that night and chose not to attend the trial, claiming that he did not remember anything. The prosecution's strongest evidence was a container found at Robert's home that held the bullets used in the attack on Leslie and Chris. Furthermore, Robert was responsible for packing and hiding the gun. He chose not to testify, which his attorney described as a strategic move. Additionally, The defense did not present any witnesses. After hearing the arguments, the jury deliberated for 3 hours and reached a unanimous verdict, finding Robert Tarr guilty of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 85 years in prison, eligible for parole after 72 years, meaning he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. At this point, Chris finally took the stand in court and spoke about the impact the shooting had on him and his family. This tragic event completely destroyed Chris's life. At 49, he was never able to return to his beloved construction job. While he was in the hospital, his home was completely looted, and even his swimming pool was stolen. After his release, he auctioned off his home, which was later demolished, leaving only an empty lot. He now bore the responsibility of providing for his family. Friends and family remain hopeful that Chris Smith can rebuild his life, but there is a strong possibility that he will never be the same again. While waiting for his memory to improve, he practices every day and learns to do without assistance. Eventually, Chris regained his position as the lead singer in his band. However, the after-effects of that senseless attack continue to haunt him as he recovers. The left side of his body remains paralyzed, and he has sought help from a leading medical research center. Chris is eager to participate in advanced research to aid his recovery. He is currently writing a book about his experiences, focusing on domestic violence. Leslie's children are in the care of her ex-husband. When a young woman suddenly stopped answering her phone and disappeared without a trace, her family immediately knew something was terribly wrong. Police got involved, confident they'd solve the case quickly. After all, she'd been house-sitting in a quiet Michigan neighborhood where nothing unusual ever happened. But what unfolded felt less like a typical missing person case and more like the start of a dark crime story. A car found deep in the woods, a body discovered in a basement, a confession that didn't make sense, and evidence pointing everywhere except where detectives claimed it did. What no one realized then was that this was only the beginning. When the truth finally came out, more than 10 years later, it didn't just devastate her family. It exposed major failures within the justice system and left people across the country in disbelief. To understand how everything went so wrong, we have to return to where it all started, with a young woman named Andrea Eilber. Andrea Eilber was born on April 17, 1991, in Flint, Michigan. Her mother passed away when she was a child, and her father later remarried. The family eventually settled in the small town of Otisville, where Andrea completed high school. After graduating, she took a job at a nearby supermarket. She thought about going to college but was still unsure of a specific direction, so she continued working and saving for the future. At work, she met Kenneth Carl Grondin, a 19-year-old co-worker. The two soon began dating. In November 2011, when Andrea was 20, her aunt and uncle left town and asked her to help house sit. At that time, she was still living with her parents, but decided to temporarily move to her aunt and uncle's house to help look after their home. For the first few days, Kenneth and a friend visited her there. They hung out, watched movies, and enjoyed each other's company. Andrea and Kenneth later made plans to spend the evening of November 14 together. She was supposed to pick him up, but shortly before then, she texted to say she couldn't make it. Instead, she asked him to go to her aunt and uncle's house, bringing some movie DVDs. Kenneth arrived around 7:30 p.m., but the house was dark, locked, and Andrea's car was gone. After knocking with no response, he tried calling her, but she didn't answer. Assuming she had stepped out, he decided to wait. About half an hour later, Andrea texted him again, saying her plans had changed and they would see each other the next day. She didn't explain where she was, and she didn't respond to any more of Kenneth's messages. The next day passed with no word from Andrea. At first, only Kenneth was worried. Since Andrea was staying at her aunt and uncle's house, her father wasn't concerned when he didn't hear from her right away. But after another day without contact, he began to worry. He asked a relative to check on her, and she went to the house with Kenneth. They looked through the windows and walked around but found no one there. Andrea's father started calling her friends, and none had heard from her for over 24 hours. The family began to fear something was wrong and organized a search. Family and friends split into groups, driving through nearby towns, parks, and other places Andrea might have gone. That evening, one of her friends found her car parked in a remote area near a national park. Just a few miles from her relative's home. The car doors were unlocked, the keys were missing, and Andrea was not there. Her father immediately called the police. With Andrea's uncle's consent, the police broke into the house. In the basement, they made a terrible discovery. Andrea was sitting in a chair with a gunshot wound to her head. The medical examiner determined she had been killed by a single gunshot fired from several feet away. She had died 2 days earlier. On the same night, she canceled her plans with Kenneth. The coroner also found marks on Andrea's wrists, indicating she had been bound with plastic tape, although the tape was missing when the body was found. The analysis suggested the ties had been removed 6 or 7 hours after her death, raising the possibility that the killer either returned later or stayed in the house for hours afterward. Investigators noted that some items were missing from the home, but it didn't appear to be a typical burglary. Most valuables were left untouched. The missing items included a bottle of perfume, a sweater, a camera, 3 knives, a rifle, ammunition, and some cash. Jewelry, and even a piece of solid gold in plain sight were left behind. While crime scene technicians searched the house, detectives learned that Andrea had a boyfriend named Kenneth and went to question him. Kenneth explained when he'd last seen Andrea and willingly gave DNA and fingerprint samples. The police confiscated the clothes he wore that night and searched his home, but found nothing suspicious. Despite this, detectives continued to question Kenneth, and over time they began to suspect that he might be the killer. Kenneth denied the accusation and took a polygraph test, which indicated no signs of deception. He said that on the night of November 14th, Andrea had suddenly canceled their plans, and he had been heartbroken. He assumed she was planning to break up with him. Upset, he went home, charged his phone, and texted a female friend, telling her that he thought Andrea was about to leave him. They messaged for a while, and then Kenneth drove to the store where she worked. The two talked more about the situation, and eventually, she invited him to join her and her roommate for a movie night. Kenneth arrived at their place around 10:00 p.m., which both women later confirmed. His phone data supported his story, showing his phone connected to a nearby cell tower at that time. About 20 minutes before arriving, a gas station camera caught him on camera. That same night, someone withdrew $300 from Andrea's bank account in the town of Davidson, about a 30-minute drive from her uncle's house. What's noteworthy is that this transaction took place only 7 minutes after Kenneth arrived at his friend's house. Far too short a time for him to have traveled between the two places. Nevertheless, the police have not yet removed him from the list of suspects. Kenneth stayed with his friends until around midnight and then went home. The next morning, he tried calling Andrea several times, but she didn't answer. Worried, he drove to her uncle's house around 10:00 a.m. and knocked on the door, but no one answered. He left and was back home by about 11:00 a.m., something confirmed by his family and his phone's data. Around that same time, another $300 was withdrawn from Andrea's account, this time in a different, more distant town. Police obtained surveillance footage of the person using the card. The image was too blurry to identify the suspect, but it showed a white pickup truck at the scene. Despite the evidence suggesting Kenneth's innocence, detectives still had doubts. They thought parts of his story didn't make sense. Kenneth admitted that he drove to Andrea's uncle's house around the time of her death and sat in the car outside for about 30 minutes, which struck detectives as odd. On top of that, when Andrea's friends and family organized a search for her on the evening of November 15th, Kenneth said he couldn't join because he had to work early the next day. Later, he told detectives he had already spent the day looking for Andrea and calling her repeatedly, assuming she was ignoring him. He believed she wanted to end the relationship, not that something bad had happened. Another concern arose when a friend of Kenneth's, who was helping with the search, asked for Andrea's uncle's home address. Kenneth gave him the wrong location, about 3 miles from the actual house. Investigators thought this was strange because Kenneth had been there many times before. Although there was still no solid evidence against him, detectives kept pressing. After more than 10 hours of questioning, police claimed Kenneth had confessed. In his affidavit, Kenneth said he went to Andrea's uncle's house that night, entered, and discovered her body in the basement. He said he thought she had hurt herself and decided to stage the crime to look like a murder so her family wouldn't know. He admitted to taking a few items that were nearby but didn't provide many details beyond that. Kenneth's confession was short, unclear, and filled with vague wording. He insisted he hadn't killed Andrea. He only claimed to have found her body. Still, detectives believed they finally had enough evidence and arrested him. As soon as they charged him with murder, Kenneth tried to take back his statement. He explained that detectives had interrogated him for hours, bombarding him with accusations until he was completely worn down. Eventually, they told him that if he wrote down a version of events where he simply discovered Andrea's body, he could go home. Believing them, Kenneth complied. But that statement became the centerpiece of the case against him. Kenneth also said detectives repeatedly deceived him. They claimed to have solid forensic evidence linking him to the crime and told him he had failed the polygraph test miserably. It was later revealed that his grandfather had hired a lawyer and sent a lawyer to the station to help. When the lawyer tried to locate Kenneth, one detective hung up on him and warned others not to disclose Kenneth's whereabouts. The lawyer spent the entire day making calls, but no officer would provide information. Kenneth, unaware that his lawyer was trying to contact him, continued to speak privately with the detectives. He later said his confession was nothing more than him repeating what they told him to say, hoping to finally go home. In truth, Kenneth claimed he didn't even know Andrea was dead. Less than a day after Andrea's body was found, detectives announced they had found a suspect. Kenneth's family and friends refused to believe he was involved, but there was little they could do. Police ended their investigation, convinced his confession would be enough to convict him. Forensic evidence, however, told a different story. Experts tested multiple samples from the crime scene, including skin under Andrea's fingernails. The DNA belonged to an unknown man, not Kenneth. A second sample found in Andrea's car matched the same unidentified person. Then there was Andrea's bank card. Someone had been withdrawing her money, but it wasn't Kenneth. Despite these red flags, detectives claimed to have found new evidence. When one officer opened the sealed bag containing Kenneth's clothes from the night Andrea disappeared, he noticed a single bloody hair stuck to Kenneth's pants. Tests showed that the hair and blood were both Andrea's, but strangely, the pants were completely bloodless. Forensic experts concluded that the hair could have been attached after Andrea died, because if Kenneth had really killed someone while wearing those pants, there would have been blood splatter. Kenneth's lawyer argued that the hair could have been contaminated during the process of collecting evidence. Kenneth's clothes were confiscated only 30 minutes after the body was found, so it is highly likely that the police accidentally got the hair on them while processing the scene. The lawyer also asked the court to dismiss Kenneth's confession, arguing that police had blocked him from seeing his client during questioning. In addition, parts of the interrogation video had mysteriously disappeared. Precisely the moments when, according to Kenneth, Detectives were feeding him the answers. The legal battle lasted 4 years before the court finally ruled that the confession would remain admissible. During that time, Kenneth was out on bail but strictly monitored. He wore a GPS ankle tracker and needed police approval to leave his home. When the trial began in 2015, the prosecution relied mainly on 2 pieces of evidence: Kenneth's confession and the bloody hair found on his pants. Their theory was that he had killed Andrea during a robbery. Even though none of the stolen items were found in his possession and her bank card had clearly been used by someone else, the prosecutor tried to explain the inconsistencies by claiming the robbery was staged. He argued that Kenneth killed Andrea to steal her money and property, but also claimed that he had staged the crime scene to create a distraction. This reasoning was weak, especially since Kenneth came from a wealthy family and didn't need the money. The prosecutor also stressed that there was no sign of forced entry and that Kenneth had a spare key to Andrea's uncle's house. Andrea had given it to him just a few days before she died, so he could visit any time. Kenneth, however, insisted he had left the key inside the house 2 days before her death. A friend who was with him at the time confirmed this account, and police later found the spare key exactly where Kenneth had said it would be. The defense argued that the case was filled with inconsistencies and that the investigation was poorly handled. They pointed out a detail the police seemed to overlook: Andrea's car had been taken and later abandoned a few miles from her house. Her father testified that the car constantly leaked oil under the driver's seat, which always left Andrea's shoes stained. By that logic, anyone who drove her car would have oil on their shoes as well. But when investigators examined Kenneth's boots, there wasn't any trace of oil. The prosecutor then changed the theory, suggesting Kenneth had an accomplice. In this version, Kenneth killed Andrea while the accomplice took the stolen items, drove off in her car, and used her bank card. Another major issue for the prosecution was that the murder weapon was never found. Police confirmed that the missing rifle from Andrea's uncle's house and Kenneth's parents' gun did not match the bullet that killed her. Kenneth's lawyer argued that the police had ignored other possible suspects because they were fixated on Kenneth from the start. To support this, the defense presented 5 alternative suspects. At the top of the list was Jeffrey, a mutual acquaintance of Kenneth and Andrea. There were several suspicious details about him. He was the one who conveniently found Andrea's car early in the search, even though it was parked miles away in a secluded area. That same day, he called Kenneth asking about Andrea, even though Kenneth had never given him his phone number. Investigators later learned Andrea had written Kenneth's number on a piece of paper that was found on her nightstand next to a spot where unidentified DNA was recovered. Jeffrey also owned a car that looked very similar to the one caught on surveillance footage when someone used Andrea's bank card at a gas station. Andrea's brother mentioned another possible suspect, a banned substance dealer. He admitted that he had been struggling with addiction and owed the dealer money. According to her brother, the dealer knew Andrea saved money from her job. So, her brother suspects the dealer may have killed her to collect the debt. Police also investigated a young man named David after his father reported that he might have been involved in Andrea's murder. David had a criminal record for car theft and assault and resembled the person seen on the surveillance video using Andrea's bank card. Despite all these leads, detectives said they found no solid evidence connecting any of these suspects to the crime. When the trial ended, the jury deliberated for 2 days before finding Kenneth guilty of first-degree murder. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His attorney immediately filed an appeal. The defense first argued that Kenneth's confession was coerced and that police had denied him legal counsel. But the court rejected those claims. Next, they appealed the robbery conviction, pointing out that Kenneth had also been found guilty of theft even though none of the stolen items were ever recovered. That appeal also failed. However, in their third attempt, Kenneth's lawyer found a significant error in the jury paperwork. Jurors had been given 2 separate murder charges to consider: first-degree and second-degree. For the first-degree charge, they could choose between guilty or not guilty. But for second-degree murder, the only option listed was guilty. This meant the jury had no way to find Kenneth not guilty of the lesser charge. They were forced to decide only how guilty he was. The appeals court could not overlook such a major procedural flaw. In 2018, Kenneth was granted a new trial after spending 3 years in prison. Following the ruling, he was released on bail again. His lawyer continued to push for new evidence that could identify the real killer, repeatedly urging police to re-examine the existing DNA samples. In 2022, investigators finally agreed to conduct a new review. At that point, Kenneth's retrial had still not started, and he remained free on bail. Forensic experts reanalyzed all unidentified male DNA connected to the case, but there were still no matches in the FBI database. They then decided to focus on the strongest piece of evidence, a cigarette butt found outside Andrea's uncle's house. This sample matched the same man whose DNA had been found under Andrea's fingernails. Confirming he was the true killer, investigators sent the cigarette butt to Arthrom, a company specializing in genetic genealogy. In January 2023, experts made a breakthrough. By using public genetic databases and tracing family connections, they identified a possible suspect, a 42-year-old man named Chadwick Mobley, who had not appeared in the original investigation. Detectives discovered that Chadwick lived in a town about 40 minutes away from the crime scene when Andrea was murdered. His phone records from November 2011 showed that on the day Andrea was killed, his phone connected to a tower near her aunt and uncle's home 23 times. By 2023, Chadwick was living in Utah, working as a delivery driver and living out of his van. Investigators asked local police to secretly collect an item containing his DNA. But because he often stayed in open areas, surveillance proved difficult. After 2 months of monitoring, officers still hadn't retrieved anything usable, so detectives decided to confront him directly. With a warrant in hand, they approached Chadwick and collected a DNA sample. He denied any involvement, but lab tests soon confirmed his DNA was under Andrea's fingernails, inside her car, and in multiple locations at the crime scene. When police searched his van, they also found a revolver. Ballistic analysis proved it was the weapon used to kill Andrea. 2 days later, police went to follow up, but Chadwick had fled. 3 weeks later, authorities tracked him to Montana near the Canadian border, where he was caught, but while being extradited to Michigan, he escaped from a police car. Despite being handcuffed and shackled, a few days later, a local sheriff spotted him by chance, paddling down a river in a canoe. That led to his second capture. This time, he was successfully brought back to Michigan and placed in custody without bail. As he had already escaped twice, Chadwick pleaded not guilty, and prosecutors began preparing their case. For local law enforcement, it was a humiliating turn of events. After more than a decade of insisting Kenneth was the killer, the new evidence, including DNA under Andrea's fingernails and the murder weapon, now pointed unmistakably to Chadwick. Investigators looked into whether Kenneth and Chadwick had any connection. Maybe they'd worked together or crossed paths? But they found none. The two men were complete strangers, and Andrea didn't know Chadwick either. At the time of her murder, Chadwick was 32 and living in a nearby town with no link to her. Despite all the new evidence, Kenneth's conviction remained in place. He continued to live under strict monitoring, wearing an ankle bracelet. Prosecutors even intensified their efforts, announcing their intention to hold a second trial based on the theory that Kenneth and Chadwick had committed the murder together. That second trial never happened for Chadwick. In February 2025, he entered a no-contest plea, meaning he wouldn't fight the charges but also wouldn't admit guilt. He told the judge he'd been extremely drunk the night Andrea was killed and couldn't remember what had happened. Though he didn't deny being involved, during the hearing, an alarming detail surfaced. Investigators had actually considered Chadwick a suspect early in the case. However, for reasons no one could explain, his name was never officially added to the case file. By then, Detectives had already focused on Kenneth. Ignoring the DNA mismatch and the missing murder weapon, Chadwick Mobley was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without parole. In court, he apologized to Andrea's family for Kenneth, though nothing changed. His lawyer immediately requested that the charges be dropped, but prosecutors refused, claiming that Chadwick's conviction didn't rule out Kenneth's involvement. They vowed to proceed with a second trial. Chadwick insisted he didn't know Kenneth or Andrea and had acted alone. Nevertheless, the state continued to pursue the case. The new trial for Kenneth is scheduled for January 2026. He remains under house arrest as his defense team builds his case, supported by a respected forensic expert who re-examined the bloodied hair on Kenneth's pants. The expert confirmed earlier findings that the hair must have ended up there several hours after Andrea's death, not during the murder. Considering all the evidence, the DNA results, the recovered weapon, Chadwick's conviction, and the forensic analysis, Kenneth now has a strong chance of clearing his name. But the toll has been immense. 14 years of his life are gone. Years spent behind bars and confined to his home. Even if the courts finally recognize his innocence, he'll never recover that lost time. And if he decides to seek justice against the officers and prosecutors responsible, that battle could last many more years. With no certainty he'll ever be fully vindicated. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Clelia Medina. Early in the morning on Sunday, February 17, 2008, a man was walking with his dog when he suddenly noticed that the dog was attracted to something strange on the ground. Looking closely, he realized it was a series of drops forming a path. He began to follow them, moving parallel to the canal, not far from Lambersart, France. The drops continued, leading him to the very shore where he noticed a body half submerged in the water. It was swollen and very pale. The man immediately reported it to the police. In the name of law enforcement, forensic experts began to carefully examine the area and the body itself. However, there was nothing that could help identify the female victim. It was not possible to find a handbag that might have contained documents, a mobile phone, or bank cards. The body was taken for an autopsy, and the police continued to investigate the area around the canal for any clues about the identity of the victim. While the medical examiner was working in his office, detectives checked the databases of missing persons to find anything that could help identify the body. In this area, no recent disappearances had been recorded. When it became obvious that the unidentified victim could not be recognized, forensic scientists began searching the canal bank for clues indicating the identity of the deceased or the perpetrator. In the relatively small area where the body was found, cigarette butts and anything that could contain human DNA were collected. To ensure that nothing was missed, a team of divers was called in to check the bottom of the canal. This decision turned out to be correct. One diver managed to retrieve a car jack from the bottom, found just a meter away from the body. The jack, belonging to a standard set for a wing car, had a serial number indicating it was used in a vehicle produced in 1997. It had been in the water for quite a long time, so traces from its surface could have washed away. However, during the examination, human bloodstains were found. They continued to collect data. Initially, it was believed that the victim had been strangled, as characteristic marks remained on her neck. However, the forensic expert concluded that the cause of death was multiple strong blows to the head with a blunt object. The location and shape of the marks resembled those made by a car jack. There were suggestions that the girl could have died in a road accident, but the longer they attempted to prove this, the less plausible the theory seemed. It was soon decided to abandon this idea. It clearly indicated a methodical beating after which the body was simply thrown into the water. A toxicological examination showed that the victim was either intoxicated from alcohol or under the influence of prohibited substances. The deceased was fully dressed, and no signs of abuse were found. At the same time, there were no marks on her hands that would indicate she had fought for her life. The attack had likely come as a surprise to her, and she was unable to defend herself. According to the forensic expert, she died around 5 a.m. The police had only one clue that could help solve the mystery of her identity: a small stamp on her palm that had miraculously not washed away in the water. Such stamps are given to club visitors at the entrance, allowing security to recognize them without the need to check passes or flyers. Typically, these stamps are unique to each establishment and are not replicated. It was quickly discovered that the victim had visited the Buccaneer Club located nearby shortly before her death. Detectives arrived at the club, immediately spoke with the administration and employees, providing them with a description of the deceased. Two young men recognized the girl because she occasionally attended the disco, but no one knew her name. The detectives managed to access the recordings from the CCTV cameras. Thanks to that, the victim was identified. She had arrived at the club the day before she was found in the canal, apparently leaving Buccaneer around 3 a.m. and being killed by 5 a.m. What happened to her between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. remained unknown. The police spoke to regular patrons and staff in the hope that someone recognized her from the CCTV footage, but no valuable clues about her identity emerged. So far, no missing persons reports had been filed. The police were left with only one option to identify the deceased: to hold a press conference and appeal to the public through the media. Detectives provided a detailed description of the victim and showed footage from the club's CCTV cameras. Within a few hours, a woman admitting that she was the mother of 18-year-old Clelia Medina. She reported that her daughter had gone to the club about a day before these events and had not returned or been in touch. She immediately became concerned. Relatives and friends had no idea where Clelia might have spent the night. No one had seen Clelia after visiting the club, which caused anxiety and prompted her mother to search for her. Approximately 36 hours had passed when she managed to contact the local police station in Lille, but received the standard excuse that law enforcement officers did not want to waste time looking for a girl who had simply gone on a spree after the club and was likely spending time with friends or a boyfriend. When she saw a news program about the police announcing the discovery of a body and the terrible circumstances surrounding the tragedy, she initially tried to dismiss any bad thoughts about it possibly being her daughter. However, the worry persisted. She literally felt that something bad had happened to her daughter and feared that it was Clelia's body that had been found in the canal. She acted extremely worried and was very agitated, providing somewhat confused information due to her emotional state. Therefore, the police decided to verify the information with Clelia's cousin, who had been with Clelia that evening. The young man confirmed some of the details provided by Clelia's mother. He helped to clarify valuable information such as the clothing and piercing locations that Clelia had. The victim's identity was almost completely matched. Clelia's mother was notified of the coincidence and was invited to identify the body. All doubts were finally dispelled. The mother was shocked by her daughter's tragic death, and she immediately began to cry. She struggled to understand who could have done this, as her daughter was an ordinary girl who did not associate with problematic people. According to her cousin, they had planned to go to Buccaneer Club together, the seal of which was found on her hand. He described his relationship with Clelia as very friendly and warm. They communicated well, supported each other. That evening, everyone was in good spirits. From the very beginning, Clelia's mother had been worried about her daughter attending the party. She felt strongly that Clelia should not go. To calm her mother, Clelia explained that they would not be walking home alone and that everything would be fine. Despite the fact that her cousin took her to the club, he did not intend to stay there long. Clelia managed to reassure her mother by telling her that her ex-boyfriend, 19-year-old Julian Saoli, was supposed to drive her home. The whole family knew him well and trusted him. Julian Saoli and Clelia had been in a relationship for about a year, which had ended a couple of months before Clelia's death. As Clelia's mother noted, even after the breakup, they continued to communicate as friends. Law enforcement officers decided to check the records of telephone conversations, which verified that Clelia had indeed called her ex-boyfriend when she left the club. However, the police did not have time to visit his home, as he came to the station on his own initiative to talk to the investigators. Julian was eager to help because he was worried about what had happened. In his statement, he emphasized that Clelia had contacted him after he left the cinema. He promptly went to the club, where he picked her up in his car in the parking lot. They spent some time together at his house, but at about 4:30 in the morning, Clelia headed home. Julian believed that she could have been attacked during this time. The police immediately questioned why he did not drive Clelia home at such a late hour. He explained that it was only a short walk left to get home, as the houses were located close together. It was already getting light, he was very tired and drunk, so cannot take her home. Clelia herself did not want to impose on anyone and was not afraid for her safety. Unfortunately, Julian simply went to bed and turned off his mobile phone to avoid being disturbed. Until he woke up, he could not reach Clelia but did not think much of it, believing that she could be spending time with someone new, as there was no romantic relationship between them anymore. However, upon learning about the tragedy in the Medina family, Julian felt compelled to help with the investigation, so provided his testimony. The detectives, however, immediately suspected that he might not just want to help. Such behavior is often seen in murderers attempting to divert suspicion from themselves. Thus, they decided not to let him leave too quickly, hoping he would either incriminate himself or provide genuine assistance in the investigation. Suspicion grew stronger as Julian reacted very calmly to the details of the crime. He did not show any emotions when looking at the disfigured image, and he appeared neither upset nor shocked. His lack of reaction to the details of his ex-girlfriend's death, combined with the fact that he was the last person to see her, made him a person of interest to the detectives. It is known that in such cases, exes are often involved, who kill out of jealousy, resentment, or revenge. To establish or refute this, the investigators asked Julian to show them his car. The detective specifically did not mention the jack that had been found in the canal. He agreed to this request without hesitation. According to his confession, he arrived at the police station in the same car in which he had driven Clelia from the club to his home. The policeman went out into the street with him, and in the parking lot, they found a notch indicating the year of manufacture of the car matched the jack. As soon as the door was opened, they felt a very strong smell of cleaning products. The interior was excessively clean for a young guy. It seemed that a very thorough cleaning had been carried out recently. Nevertheless, Julian immediately justified himself by saying that he had bought a new car only 10 days prior, and the previous owner had cleaned it well before selling it. The police were most interested in the possibility of blood being present. Perhaps Julian could have attacked Clelia in his car or transported the body after the attack. When the mat in the trunk was lifted, they found several suspicious dark red drops that were collected for further analysis. However, none of these stains belonged to Clelia. Nevertheless, Julian continued to be considered the main suspect. It was believed that this was an attack based on passion, so the killer must have known the victim well. Furthermore, the make of the car matched the jack was found at the bottom of the canal. Julian seemed ideal as a suspect based on all the criteria. After, they found one valuable clue, a blood stain on one of Julian's sneakers. After examination, it was possible to prove that the blood belonged to Clelia, but it was not possible to date it with precision. Julian insisted that the stain appeared by chance when Clelia had a nosebleed about a month before the tragedy. However, his words could not be confirmed or refuted, so this evidence turned out to be indirect. Even Clelia's family was sure that Julian could not have done this. He had always been a very nice guy. Clelia's mother believed wholeheartedly that he was not capable of murder. She commented that Clelia was almost crazy about Julian based on his appearance. He was very kind, loving, and gave Clelia many gifts. However, their relationship was not entirely smooth. They often argued. Julian as an accomplished young man for his age. He grew up in a strict but loving family in Lille, France. From an early age, he was interested in sports, especially football, which he played with his father. He was not prone to violence and avoided fights, despite being in perfect shape. However, he was forced to drop out of school because of football, wanting to build a sports career, and simply chose training over textbooks. His parents supported their son's decision, especially since he was mature enough for his age. At the same time, they described him as charming but very jealous. They mentioned that he could become upset over a random photo of a stranger on the internet that Clelia was looking at. As their relationship progressed, Julian became more and more jealous. Due to such tumultuous dynamics, they eventually broke up. Despite the tensions, they continued to maintain friendly relations, and everything seemed normal. Except for the circumstantial evidence against Julian, there was no concrete proof. He was released pending further investigation. Then, Julian was arrested and charged with Clelia's murder. He spent about a year in prison, but his lawyer managed to get him released before his trial. Julian repeatedly appealed, claiming there was insufficient evidence to convict him, and was released on bail. However, this lasted until 2011, when his formal trial began. A rather controversial trial lay ahead. From the very beginning, the situation was tense, partly because Clelia's family had changed their opinion about Julian over the lengthy investigation period. They became convinced, based on several dubious facts, that the deceased's ex-boyfriend was indeed a criminal. Clelia's family now demanded punishment for the supposed killer. At this stage, it was necessary to assess the mental health of the suspect. In June 2008, Julian was visited by an expert psychiatrist who noted no deviations. Julian willingly made contact and described in detail the events related to Clelia. He admitted that there had indeed been several conflicts which ended in slaps to the face. Although he did not think this was normal, he justified himself, citing jealousy regarding Clelia and claiming that she had stolen from him multiple times. After the examination, the specialist concluded that Julian was completely in his right mind and capable of appearing in court. Tension was literally in the air. The defense team escalated the situation to the point where a fight broke out right in the courtroom. Several people were slightly injured, so the trial was postponed because of this unpleasant incident and the subsequent bureaucratic red tape. Everything was delayed for another year until 2012. From February 2009 until the start of the trial in June 2012, Julian lived with his paternal aunts near Paris. She immediately noticed how angry he was. At first, they thought it was connected to the slander against him. However, his discontent grew as the trial approached. Meanwhile, the Medina family accused Julian's lawyer of unnecessarily dragging out the proceedings, which only heightened tensions. The first witnesses began to speak at the meetings. There was a mutual friend of Clelia and Julian who recalled that all three of them had once been driving in a car together after their romantic relationship had ended. Julian had even started dating a new girl, who happened to be one of Clelia's close friends. This situation made she very upset and jealous. Despite their breakup, a conflict ensued between them, which even escalated to physical confrontation. They exchanged blows. At one point, Clelia even attempted to jump out of the moving car, but Julian managed to pull her back inside. By the time the car reached her friend's house, Clelia finally exited and continued yelling at Julian from the street. He tried to calm her down, but she simply waved her hand dismissively and left the scene. This friend was convinced this was not an isolated incident, as outbursts of jealousy and aggression were repeated throughout their relationship. In addition to this event, Clelia's parents recalled several instances during family vacations with Julian where he lost control. They once caught him walking around the apartment with a weapon. However, he had managed to convince Clelia's relatives that it was just a failed joke. They now understood the situation was much more serious. From the very beginning, Clelia had been in great danger. Another friend of Julian recounted an incident where, in a fit of rage, he began to choke one of his girlfriends. The once pleasant, sociable, and good-natured Julian was now portrayed as a monster capable of losing control at any moment. So, the change in the Medina family's attitude toward him did not seem strange. Julian had lied about the time. He told the police that Clelia left his house at 4:30 a.m. Detectives managed to track their mobile phones and prove that they were still together at 5 a.m., which is when Clelia was believed to have died. Subsequently, Clelia's phone unexpectedly turned off at 5:10 a.m. Previously, during an interrogation, Julian said that attempted to contact Clelia again but could not get a response. Detectives believed the call to his ex-girlfriend was made intentionally to create an alibi. Shortly thereafter, Julian's phone also turned off for several hours. Investigators suspected he deliberately turned off his devices to avoid being tracked. Despite all the circumstantial evidence against him, Julian continued to insist on his innocence. His lawyer argued that none of this evidence proved his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Throughout the investigation, detectives tried to extract a confession from Julian, but he steadfastly maintained his innocence. The pressure from authorities led him to feel embittered. He claimed that the persecution caused him to face difficulties in real life and to suffer from insults, unfounded accusations. Phone records revealed something intriguing. Julian's new girlfriend also tried to contact Clelia shortly before the murder. At first, she did not disclose any details as to why she tried to contact Clelia at all. However, in 2011, the girl spoke to detectives and made a rather dubious statement. According to her, she felt guilty that Clelia was dead. The reason for her fears stemmed from the fact that, as a close friend of Clelia, she was dating Julian. This clearly caused great discontent for his ex-girlfriend, who took every opportunity to contact him. On that fateful night, Julian's new girlfriend decided to act on her feelings. She did not like Clelia as such attention directed at the guy. She believed that this was the impetus for another conflict between the exes, which ended tragically. When the police received this statement, they were puzzled and decided to explore this new details. The application ended up at the station, and detectives tried to find out if it was possible that she was an accomplice. They insisted that Julian's new girlfriend may have unintentionally provoked the attack but did not pursue such a goal intentionally. According to her, she had been afraid to admit it because she feared her boyfriend's reaction. The neck of the deceased showed clear signs of strangulation, as if her throat had been squeezed with bare hands. Apparently, the victim could not have been killed in this way, so the criminal used a metal jack from the car. Although it was inconvenient, it quickly became the instrument that ended the innocent girl's life. The killer inflicted a large number of blows to her head and face, which proved fatal. The degree of cruelty was astounding. He broke her facial bones. The prosecutor addressed the jury, stating that leaving such a dangerous person at large was a crime. Despite the circumstantial nature of the evidence, the prosecution managed to prove the defendant's guilt. The prosecution's witnesses appeared scared as they recounted their experiences with the real Julian. The jury found Julian salely guilty of premeditated murder. As he left the courtroom, he turned to the victim's family and said something that sounded like a threat. From the very moment Julian found himself behind bars, he began writing endless appeals to challenge the sentence, insisting that he was a victim of bias and incompetence. Probably feeling his helplessness and unbearable situation, he even insulted one of the judges in writing, subsequently refusing to retract his comments, insisting he was a victim of governmental arbitrariness. However, all his requests were rejected. While in prison, he was involved in another incident related to his inability to control his aggression. Using a homemade sharpener, he threatened to kill one of the prison guards, whom he took hostage for several minutes. Julian was eventually overpowered and neutralized. Now, he remains behind bars. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Idaberli Lozano. Idaberli Lozano was the son of Tatiana Ferreira Lozano Pereira. After divorcing Idaberli's father, Tatiana got married to Alex Pereira. Together, Tatiana and Alex had another child. People who knew the family described them as quiet and unproblematic. Tatiana worked as a manager at a local supermarket, and her eldest son, Idaberli, lived with her. He was considered a polite and well-behaved boy, who enjoyed spending his free time listening to music with his friends. The situation worsened when, at the age of 14, Itaberli confided to his mother that he was different from other boys and was not attracted to girls. From that moment on, his mother often ridiculed him, and their arguments became increasingly frequent. By the end of 2016, their relationship had deteriorated significantly, and Tatiana began physically abusing her son. The day after Christmas, Itaberli shared several posts on Facebook describing his difficult home life. He included a photo of himself with his mother, stepfather, and younger brother. In the post, he wrote mainly about his family. He also shared other photos showing bloody cuts and scrapes on his face, back, chest, and arms. In the comments, Itaberli revealed that his mother had beaten him and kicked him out of the house because he was different from other children. In the post, Itaberli mentioned that he was staying with a friend because his mother had ordered the children in their neighborhood to attack him. A few days later, he returned to his mother's house, but the arguments continued. One day, his mother beat him again, forcing him to run away. This time, he went to his grandmother's house, where he finally found safety. His paternal family welcomed and accepted him. His mother, Tatiana, called him several times, urging him to return home before December 29, claiming that she wanted to make up with him before New Year's Eve. However, his uncle, Dario Rosa, and other family members did not agree to let Itaberli return to his mother. They doubted Tatiana's sincerity and suspected that she might endanger the boy. Despite their warnings, Itaberli was happy that his mother seemed willing to mend their relationship. Hoping to improve things with her, he left his grandmother's house, unaware that a trap awaited him. Tatiana had devised a cruel plan to teach her son a lesson. She hired two young men, Victor Roberto da Silva and Miller da Silva Barisa, to attack him. When Itaberli arrived home, Victor and Miller entered the room while Tatiana was present and attacked him. Itaberli screamed for help, pleading with his mother, but she stood by, unmoved, until he collapsed. Tatiana's plan did not end there. When she found her son unconscious, she instructed the young men to kill him, but they refused. Determined to resolve what she saw as her son's unconventional tendencies, Tatiana went into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and attacked him. Victor and Miller, horrified by what they witnessed, fled the house. Tatiana then went into the bedroom, where her husband was sleeping, and woke him up to help her dispose of the body. Together, they wrapped the body in a blanket, put it in the car, and drove to a remote, sparsely populated area with thick reeds along the road. There, they abandoned the body and returned home to clean up the scene. The next day, the couple returned to the location, doused the body with gasoline, and burned it to prevent identification. From that day on, Itaberli's paternal relatives could no longer contact him. As time passed, his grandmother became increasingly worried. He did not call to update her on his reconciliation with his mother. She had expected him to join her for the New Year celebrations, as they had planned to celebrate together. With no news from Itaberli, she asked his uncle to take her to Tatiana's house to inquire about Itaberli. When they arrived at Tatiana's house, they found her calm. She explained that her son was not home because he had gone to a friend's house, and she had no further information about him. His grandmother was unsure whether to believe Tatiana or call the police. However, after several hours of being unable to contact her grandson, she decided to get the police involved. Itaberli's grandmother believed that her grandson would not disappear without informing her, especially since they had planned to spend the holidays together. She was convinced that something serious had happened and felt an investigation was necessary. She shared all her suspicions with the police. Itaberli's uncle Dario mentioned the strained relationship between Tatiana and her son. Furthermore, when questioned, Tatiana appeared surprisingly calm about the situation. Her lack of concern and failure to report her son missing raised suspicions. The police began an investigation, focusing primarily on Tatiana. A few days later, on January 7, 2017, a patrol discovered the burned body of a young man wrapped up and left in a rural area of São Paulo. The body had deep stab wounds, and an intact bracelet was found nearby. Police suspected the body was that of Ita Burley, who had recently been reported missing. They notified the boy's grandmother, who identified the bracelet as her grandson's. However, this alone was not sufficient to confirm the identity of the body. Investigators requested the Institute of Forensic Medicine to conduct a DNA test using genetic material from the boy's mother. Forensic experts determined that the victim had died approximately 10 days earlier. Police also concluded that the location where the body was discovered was not the crime scene, as no evidence was found there. On January 11, police searched Tatiana's home and discovered bloodstains on the sofa, bed, and walls. They also found 2 kitchen knives with bloodstains, suspected to be the murder weapons. Tatiana and her husband Alex were arrested. Confronted with the evidence and unable to deny it, Tatiana confessed to killing her eldest son, but provided a completely different version of events. She claimed that on the day she intended to reconcile with Ita Burley, he came home drunk and aggressive. According to Tatiana, he attacked her, her husband, and their 4-year-old son. Tatiana alleged that she and her husband acted in self-defense, killing their son because they believed he was a threat to their family. Out of fear, they disposed of the boy's body. However, the police did not believe this testimony. Contradictions in Tatiana's and Alex's accounts revealed that both were lying. Statements from relatives about Ita starkly contrasted with those of his mother. Tatiana described her son as problematic, accusing him of using illegal drugs, drinking excessively, avoiding work, and being disliked by the community. However, neighbors and acquaintances who knew Ita Burley and his paternal family described him as responsible, kind, considerate, polite, and well-liked. He also maintained a close circle of friends and avoided alcohol or drugs. The police gathered additional evidence linking Tatiana and Alex to Ita Burley's murder. A key piece of evidence was an attempt to delete a Facebook post written by Ita Burley, in which he mentioned being attacked. Fortunately, some of his friends had saved the post and turned it over to the police. Suddenly, Tatiana changed her story, adding 3 more people to the case: Victor, Miller, and a girl who acted as an intermediary for their communication. In this new version, Tatiana claimed that she had asked the young men to teach her son a lesson because he had threatened and attacked her. However, she alleged that the young men had killed her son without her consent while she was outside the house. She said she heard her son screaming for help, but when she returned, she discovered that the killers had fled. She then woke her husband, and together they disposed of the body. The defense argued that Tatiana had acted out of anger and self-defense, claiming that Burley had been aggressive and had previously attacked his mother. However, significant inconsistencies in Tatiana's story cast doubt on her claims. On January 13, the police arrested Victor, Miller, and the girl who had acted as an intermediary between Tatiana and the 2 men. The girl was also a witness to the crime. The testimonies of these young people differed significantly from Tatiana's version of events. According to the girl, Tatiana had confided in her several times that she was extremely angry with her son, whom she described as different from other boys. Tatiana expressed a desire to find someone to beat her son. The girl suggested her boyfriend and his friend, who were willing to do the job for a fee. Tatiana immediately hired them. The girl stated that after Victor and Miller left the house, Tatiana killed Ita Burley. She claimed to have witnessed this with her own eyes, seeing Tatiana take a knife and stab her son to death. Victor and Miller shared their version of events. Their testimonies were consistent and the police believed them. They stated that they did not receive any money from Tatiana and confirmed that they were not present at the murder, as they had already left the house by that time. After gathering all the evidence, on February 9, 2017, the prosecutor's office transferred the case to court on charges of murder. Tatiana and Alex were also charged with concealing a corpse. The couple's lawyer argued that Tatiana had acted in self-defense and that Alex had been asleep during the incident. However, the prosecutor contended that the crime was motivated by Tatiana's inability to accept her son's non-traditional tendencies. the court decided to detain Tatiana, Alex, Miller, and Victor. During the criminal proceedings, Tatiana remained in custody, while Alex and the two young men were transferred to the Santa Rosa jail. Following the court's decision to impose detention orders on all the defendants, Tatiana's defense lawyer resigned. A new attorney was appointed to represent her. The new attorney argued that Ita Berli had been a problematic child who had previously threatened to harm other family members. The attorney also claimed that Ita Berli's aunt had filed 2 complaints against him. However, the county police reported that no such complaints had been filed. The murder, as reported by the media, deeply shocked the community. Ita Berli's Facebook page quickly turned into a memorial site, filled with messages of grief and demands for justice. A few days later, the police conducted a reenactment of the crime, during which only Tatiana was present. During the reenactment, Tatiana was temporarily taken back to her home. She recounted the events of that day in detail, explaining how she had taken her son's life and identifying the location where she and her husband had dumped and burned the body. People gathered at the crime scene. Some accused Tatiana of being a heartless and cruel mother, while others came to her defense. Among those defending Tatiana was her mother, Ita Berli's grandmother. She asserting that Tatiana had acted in self-defense against her son, whom she described as disobedient and difficult to manage. The police no longer believed these claims, and the number of those opposing Tatiana grew significantly. 7 months after the murder, Ita Berli's body was finally returned to the family for a Christian burial during a 2-hour funeral service. Friends of Ita Berli gathered at the city cemetery to bid him farewell. Throughout the months of investigation, the police collected numerous statements from the family's neighbors. They confirmed that there were issues within the family, which escalated after Ita Berli revealed to his mother that he was different from other boys and that he did not like girls. Many neighbors reported frequent quarrels and incidents of domestic violence. They also claimed that Tatiana often bullied her son, even after he returned home bruised from being beaten by other children. On November 27, 2019, a jury convicted Tatiana Ferreira Lozano Pereira of murder, sentencing her to 25 years and 9 months in prison. Victor Roberto da Silva and Miller da Silva Barisa were each sentenced to 21 years and 8 months in prison for their involvement in the brutal beating and indirect role in causing the death of Ita Berli. As for Tatiana's husband, Alex, his trial was postponed. Relatives of Ita Berli expressed relief, believing that justice had been served. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lori Bray. Lori Bray lives in the small town of Laurel, in Yellowstone County, Montana. Lori, who is 57 years old, is known for being friendly and welcoming. She lives in a quiet area with her 2 dogs. Her friends and neighbors consider her to be one of the nicest people around. Every day, she calls her children and grandchildren. Lori maintains close relationships with her family and neighbors. Lori works at a casino, and on September 30, 2019, she finished her shift and went home around midnight. She was supposed to report to work at 8:30 a.m. on October 1, but she did not show up. This was unusual because Lori is very responsible in her job. When the manager tried to call Lori but was unsuccessful, she decided to check on Lori herself to find out what was going on. The manager started driving around her workplace, hoping to see Lori. On a deserted road, she spotted a car that looked similar to Lori's. From a distance, it seemed like something was off about the location of the car and the surrounding area, as it was parked in a place surrounded by fields. She decided not to approach the car because she wasn't sure if it was indeed Lori's. Instead, she parked at a safe distance and called Lori's son to express her concern about Lori's disappearance. Lori's son mentioned that he hadn't received his mother's usual morning call, which was unusual and made him worried. He had also tried calling her earlier, but her phone did not respond to either calls or texts. Lori's son returned home to find his mother's car missing from its usual spot. No one answered the door when he knocked. He looked through the window, but saw no one inside. The dogs were there, appearing restless, which worried him because Lori always took care of her pets and never let them go hungry. It seemed that his mother might not have come home from work. He looked around the house but did not notice anything unusual. Using his key to enter, he saw that the bed was made, but none of his mother's belongings were there. The kettle was cold, indicating that she had not cooked breakfast or spent the night there. Concerned, he called his mother's manager to inform her that Lori was not home. He suspected that his mother had not returned from work and mentioned that the car the manager had seen was likely Lori's, suggesting that they check on it. The manager agreed to check on the car and waited for him to arrive. As he drove up, they approached a 2003 Lexus, which was unlocked and clearly Lori's car. They opened the door and looked inside, finding Lori's purse and her cell phone, which was still on. The phone had several missed calls. They decided not to continue searching the car to avoid losing any evidence and quickly called the police. When the police arrived and opened the car, they immediately noticed some alarming signs: blood stains on the driver's seat, a boot print, and Lori's dirty shoes. Lori's torn clothes were found, indicating that a struggle had taken place. This evidence suggested that something terrible had happened. As a result, the police began searching for her, fearing that she might have been attacked and possibly killed. The community around Lori's home reacted strongly to her disappearance. Many people shared information about her on social media, distributed flyers, and actively participated in the search efforts. The area was very quiet, with almost no incidents. Attacks were rare and caused a strong reaction from the local people. The media covered the case, hoping to draw attention and find anyone who might know something about the events of that tragic night, but no one came forward. The case left the community extremely uneasy, as residents feared that a dangerous killer was still on the loose. Concerned locals knew that Lori had set up a fund to support her family and care for the dogs she had left behind. Lori's car was found in a large area filled with fields, dirt, and grass, making it difficult for the police to find clues. Many people joined the search the next morning. Meanwhile, police discovered that around 1 a.m., the local sheriff had come across Lori's car but had not conducted a thorough search. Surveillance footage from the casino showed no suspicious activity. Lori was performing her routine duties, cleaning up after her shift, and then went home without incident. Police sought witnesses who had been at the casino that day to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual. They interviewed several visitors, but did not receive any useful information. The surveillance footage showed that there were only a few customers in the casino that day. In the hours before she left, Lori had only a few brief interactions with customers, including 2 women at the bar and a man who arrived at the casino around 11 p.m. Lori served him a drink and checked his ID, which was part of her standard procedure to confirm he was of legal age. The young man remained at the casino until late at night. Nothing unusual happened inside the casino after that. The young man calmly left, followed by Lori. Meanwhile, the police began reviewing the security footage from outside the casino. Lori left the casino with her belongings, locked the doors, and got into her car just after midnight. Before leaving, she had a brief conversation with the same young man who had left before her. After their conversation, he got into the passenger seat of her car, and they drove away together. The casino was deserted at this point, leading to suspicions that this man was the last person to see Lori before she disappeared. The police needed to identify this man. They showed the surveillance footage to casino employees and customers, who recognized him as 24-year-old Diego Hernandez. The police decided to speak to him immediately and went to his registered address. Diego confirmed that he was the person in the video. He explained that he had asked Lori for a ride because he had been at the casino too long and had no way to get home. Lori agreed to drive him, and after dropping him off, she left. Diego then went to another party to continue his night, claiming that he never saw Lori again. Although Diego's explanation seemed plausible, the police remained suspicious of the fresh scratches on his hands and face. They asked him about the source of the scratches. Diego claimed that he had gotten into an argument with a friend before going to the casino, and that a ring with a sharp edge had caused the injuries. He spoke calmly and confidently, answering the police's questions without hesitation, which made him seem trustworthy. The police found no inconsistencies in his story, and they therefore left. Diego's alibi needed to be verified, as there were no other leads to pursue. The police spoke to the friend who had allegedly argued with Diego shortly before Lori's disappearance. The friend confirmed that they had met a few days earlier, but insisted that there had been no fight. The police reviewed the casino security footage again to see if there were any scratches on Diego's face, but the video quality was poor. They then discovered that he had been to a bar before going to the casino and requested the bar's surveillance camera footage. This footage confirmed that there were no visible scratches on his face. While they continued to gather information, a man reported to the police at 7:30 p.m. that he had seen the body of a woman while driving an ATV in the woods. The police quickly arrived at the scene and located the woman's body, lying in a ditch and covered in mud. They believe the body found is Lori, who is missing. The body had multiple severe injuries, indicating that the attacker may have kicked or hit her several times. Lori's body was found 3 kilometers from her car, and there were multiple scratches on her body, especially on her face, which was severely injured. Forensic experts later determined that she had 2 broken ribs and signs of strangulation. Lori was not killed at the scene where her body was found. It had been brought there later. There was evidence of dragging on her back. It is possible that she was killed in the car where bloodstains were found or nearby. During the investigation, the police found a clear shoe print at the scene that matched the shoe print inside Lori's car. This shoe print could be important evidence and should be compared with the shoes of Diego, who is a suspect. The autopsy results showed that Lori died from strangulation. Experts found evidence that she had been abused, as some of the wounds on her body contained male DNA. The police continued to investigate the information provided by Diego. They checked the data related to the location of Lori's phone and found that she had never been to Diego's house, contrary to his claims. This further cast doubt on his credibility. Furthermore, in interviews with employees from another bar that Diego had previously visited, the police learned that he had harassed the staff there. He acted aggressively and rudely, insisting that they give him a ride home, but all the employees refused. The police gathered enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for Diego's home. They discovered a pair of Nike sneakers, which were subsequently sent to a lab for analysis. It was found that the sneakers had recently been washed. The results indicated that the sneakers matched the shoe prints found in Lori's car. The police also found the clothes that Diego had been wearing at the bar and casino on the day Lori went missing. However, these items had been thoroughly washed with bleach. The clothes were sent for testing to check for blood or DNA evidence, but unfortunately, no traces were found after the washing. The police examined Diego's phone and found suspicious search queries, such as "How long does an investigation last?" and "When do FBI agents get involved in an investigation?" Diego was therefore brought in for further questioning, and a DNA sample was taken from him to compare with the sample found on Lori's body. During re-interrogation, Diego became nervous and changed his story. He said that he and Lori had known each other for a long time. Diego claimed that they had stopped in a secluded area to talk and smoke. Afterwards, they got intimate in Lori's car, and after a short conversation, he left without knowing what would happen next. The police conducting the interrogation were skeptical of his story because it was completely out of character for Lori. Those who knew Lori found it hard to believe that a woman who spent all her free time with her children and grandchildren could be involved with someone so much younger. Furthermore, Lori had previously escaped a toxic relationship and had sworn off her private life, promising never to date again. Even if there was some connection between her and Diego, it was hard to believe that he would leave immediately after their meeting, leaving her alone in the car in the middle of a field. The police believed that Diego's story was a lie and that he was responsible for the crime, so they continued to gather more evidence. Feeling pressured, Diego changed his story again, claiming that he had been secretly dating Lori for over a year. However, a thorough examination of their phone records revealed that this was false. They had not communicated with each other and had not called or texted, making it difficult to believe that their relationship was serious and long-lasting. In fact, it seemed that they had never even met before that tragic night. If they had really been together for a year, why had Lori not introduced him to her friends or family? And why had she asked for his ID if they already knew each other? These inconsistencies made his story seem completely unbelievable. On October 8, 2019, Diego Hernandez was arrested for first-degree murder. The news shocked the local community, as they knew Diego to be a calm and polite person who had never shown cruelty or violence. The prosecution said, Diego asked Lori for a ride, and she, trusting him, agreed without questioning his true intentions. During the ride, Diego made inappropriate advances toward Lori, who refused him. In response, he attacked her, overpowering her in a secluded area where he abused and strangled her. Tests confirmed the presence of Diego's DNA under Lori's fingernails, indicating that she had fought for her life and attempted to scratch his face in self-defense. The trial of Diego Hernandez began in March 2021. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, Diego maintained his innocence, claiming he had a romantic relationship with Lori, a claim that was refuted by her children, friends, and co-workers who knew her well. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found Diego Hernandez guilty of first-degree murder, citing clear evidence that the crime was premeditated. Diego then astonished everyone by admitting his guilt. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving only 35 years. He has since been incarcerated in Montana.